The gym fell silent. Not the polite kind of silence, the kind that happens when something in the air shifts, when every person in the room suddenly understands they've just witnessed something they cannot explain. A man with a limp had just thrown a black belt across a mat like he weighed nothing. The instructor lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, chest heaving, pride shattered. And the man standing over him? He wasn't breathing hard. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even looking at Gavin anymore. He was looking at his daughter. If you're new here, subscribe right now. Hit that bell. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to know how far this story travels. And if this one hits you the way I think it will, like it, share it, and stay with me until the very last word. Because this is the kind of story that doesn't let go. The cold came early that year. Not the romantic kind of cold that dusts car hoods with frost and makes people feel poetic about hot coffee. This was the kind of cold that cracked the corners of your mouth, turned your fingers stupid, and made the walk from a parking lot to a building feel like a small punishment. The kind of cold that reminded you winter in Colorado wasn't a season so much as an argument, one the mountains always won. Ryan Calder pulled into the Westbrook Recreation Center parking lot at 6:47 p.m. and sat in the car for an extra 30 seconds before he got out. He did this every Tuesday, not because he dreaded the cold. He'd been in worse. He'd been soaking wet in 30-degree water with a rucksack full of wet sand strapped to his back, while a man with a bullhorn told him he was going to fail. Cold parking lots in Colorado were nothing. He sat in the car for 30 seconds because it was the only 30 seconds of genuine silence he got on Tuesdays. No dishes waiting, no inbox, no voicemails from the district HR department about the insurance forms he kept forgetting to file. No Emma asking where her left volleyball knee pad was. Always the left one, never the right. A phenomenon Ryan had stopped trying to understand. Just 30 seconds of nothing. Then he got out, pulled his jacket tighter, and walked toward the building with the particular rolling gait that came from having a carbon fiber prosthetic below his right knee. After 6 years, it had become as natural as breathing. He didn't think about it anymore. It was just the way he moved through the world. Step, click, step, click. The automatic doors of the Westbrook Rec Center slid open and swallowed him into fluorescent warmth. What? The building smelled like rubber flooring, industrial cleaner, and the specific brand of communal sweat that attached itself permanently to every gym in America, regardless of how often they mopped. Ryan didn't mind. He'd spent enough time in places that smelled like blood and diesel and burning to find something almost comforting about ordinary gym smell. He signed in at the front desk. Travis, the college-age kid who worked Tuesday evenings, gave him a chin lift and a, "Hey, Mr. C," without looking up from his phone, and followed the familiar path down the main corridor. Emma's volleyball practice ran until 8 p.m. in Gym B. It was 6:50. Ryan had a full 70 minutes, which meant he'd find a bleacher seat, drink the lukewarm coffee he'd poured into a thermos at 5:30 and forgotten about, and either read or stare at nothing in particular while he thought about whether the check engine light on the SUV was something he could ignore for another 3 weeks. He was fairly confident he could. He rounded the corner toward the main gym, Gym A, a large open space used for the Tuesday evening adult fitness programs, and stopped just inside the doorway. He almost kept walking. Almost. The class was set up in a loose semicircle along the far wall. 12 adults, men and women ranging from maybe 20 to maybe 55, were watching a man in the center of the space demonstrate a takedown on a compliant volunteer. The man doing the demonstrating wore a crisp white GI with a black belt knotted perfectly at his waist. He was big. Not professional athlete big, but the kind of big that came from years of lifting and protein shakes and being told he looked impressive in a gym context. Broad shoulders, square jaw. The sort of face that had never had any real trouble projecting authority. He moved with the fluid confidence of someone who genuinely knew what he was doing. Smooth transitions, controlled weight distribution, economical footwork. Ryan noted it without meaning to. Old habits. His brain still cataloged movement the way other people cataloged faces. Decent technique, good balance. Relies on size advantage more than he probably realizes. The man released his training partner and rolled his shoulders back. "Again," he said. "From the outside grip, go." 2 students squared up and tried to replicate what he'd shown them. One of them did it passably. The other one telegraphed the move, so obviously you could have set a calendar to it. Ryan watched for about 4 seconds. Then he turned to leave. He didn't make it. Hey! The voice came from behind him, loud, deliberately loud, the kind of volume that wasn't about volume so much as it was about an audience. Ryan turned. The instructor was looking directly at him. The 12 students had shifted to follow the instructor's gaze. "You're blocking the doorway," the man said. He smiled when he said it. The smile didn't reach anything above his mouth. Ryan stepped to the side. "Sorry." He meant it. No, come on in, don't be shy." "I'm good, just passing through." "You sure? You look like you might need some of what we're teaching." The instructor tilted his head slightly, doing something with his expression that wasn't quite a smirk but was trying hard to become one. "We do have a beginner level, if that's more your speed." A couple of students shifted uncomfortably. One of them looked at the floor. Ryan looked at the instructor for a long moment. He took in the setup, the clean G, the careful posture, the performance of it all. He recognized the type. Not the training, the type. "I'm good," Ryan said again and turned back toward the corridor. He found a seat in the Gym B bleachers and watched Emma's volleyball practice for about 20 minutes without actually seeing much of it. His mind was doing what it sometimes did, running quiet background calculations that had nothing to do with what was in front of him. The kind of half-present mental state that Emma called the submarine mode, and that his old therapist had called dissociation, and that Ryan privately thought of as just being Ryan. Emma was playing well. She'd gotten her mother's natural coordination, which was a good thing because she certainly hadn't gotten it from Ryan, who had been athletic in the way SEALs were athletic, capable, durable, and quietly brutal, rather than in the way volleyball players were athletic, which required a different kind of grace entirely. He watched her plant and jump for a block at the net. She was the second shortest girl on the team, which drove her absolutely crazy. Ryan allowed himself half a smile. He drank some of the thermos coffee. It was cold now. He drank it anyway. "What?" I went back to the main corridor at 7:30 to stretch his legs and refill the thermos from the water fountain. He'd given up on the coffee. And that was when he heard the voice again, louder this time, not instructing, performing. Ryan came around the corner and stopped again in the Gym A doorway. The class configuration had changed. The students were pressed back toward the wall in a rough cluster. The instructor, Ryan had already mentally tagged him, the black belt, which wasn't a compliment so much as a label, was in the center of the space, circling. He was doing what some instructors did when the regular material ran thin, or when they wanted to remind the room who was in charge. He was talking. Long circular sentences that started with a point and ended somewhere else. Ryan had met drill instructors like this, entertaining in their own way, up to a point. Then the man's eyes found Ryan in the doorway again, and everything shifted. "Look who's back," the black belt said. He said it brightly, the way a bad host at a party says, "Look who finally made it," when they want everyone to look, and they want everyone to know they're being watched. "The guy from earlier. Come on in this time. Seriously, don't hover." Several students turned. Ryan recognized the particular discomfort on some of their faces, the look of people who had seen this before and weren't sure what to do about it. He should have walked away. He knew that. He was 40 years old next spring, close enough, and he had long since stopped needing to be right in rooms that didn't matter. But the corridor behind him was empty, and the water fountain was broken anyway, so he stepped inside. "Gavin Holt," the man said, extending a hand with that same bright performance smile. "Owner and head instructor, Holt Defense Systems. 12 years teaching self-defense, 8 as a certified combatives instructor." He paused. "And you are?" "Ryan." "Ryan." Gavin repeated the name like he was trying it on for size. "What brings you to the rec center on a Tuesday night, Ryan?" "Picking up my daughter." "Volleyball?" "Yeah." "Nice." Gavin nodded, still smiling. "You do any training yourself? Martial arts? Self-defense? Anything like that?" "Not really. Not anymore." "Not anymore." Another repeat. Gavin had a habit of echoing the last thing a person said, and it was the conversational equivalent of a hand on your shoulder, technically harmless, technically friendly, and entirely deliberate. "What happened? Injury?" Ryan glanced at the leg. "Back up." "Something like that." Gavin held his gaze for a beat. Then he turned back to his students, and his voice expanded to fill the room again. "See, this is actually a perfect teaching moment." He gestured toward Ryan in the casual way you gesture at an object rather than a person. One of the most important things I teach in this program is threat assessment, reading the room, understanding who in a given space presents a potential threat and who doesn't. You have to be realistic about this. He let the pause settle. Take our friend Ryan here. Good-looking guy. But if he walked into a situation, a parking lot, a bar, whatever, how do you think he reads? Some students didn't respond. A few looked at Ryan the way you look at someone who's about to be embarrassed and you can't stop it. One woman near the back said carefully, "I don't think we should—" "Low threat," Gavin said, writing over her. "Right? That's not an insult, that's just tactical reality. A compromised gait, which, Ryan, I can see you've got, immediately signals limited mobility. Limited mobility signals limited response capacity. In a real encounter, that matters." He crossed his arms. "The way you carry yourself, man. The way you move. Shoulders rounded. No eye contact with the room, soft posture. Everything about you says don't notice me. And in a self-defense context, that's a problem." Ryan said nothing. He was looking at a scuff mark on the mat about 8 feet to his left. It was a small thing, black rubber on the green surface, from the toe of a training shoe. And he focused on it because it was easier than focusing on the sensation currently moving through his chest. Not anger. Not exactly. Something colder. "Actually," Gavin continued, walking a slow half circle, clearly in the groove now, "this is something I want you all to really internalize. Physical limitation is not something you can train around if it's severe enough, and I don't say that to be cruel." He said it in the tone of someone who absolutely said it to be cruel. "But if you can't move, if you can't generate the footwork, the weight transfer, the basic mobility that any decent combative system requires, then you are genuinely, honestly, at a disadvantage that cannot be overcome by attitude or spirit or whatever inspirational thing you want to call it. Reality doesn't care about your feelings." He stopped, looked at Ryan. "No offense, man." "None taken," Ryan said. His voice was flat, completely empty. The kind of empty that a certain type of person hears as submission and a certain other type of person hears as a countdown. Gavin heard it as submission. Ryan heard it as a countdown. "Oh." Gavin smiled, turned back to his students, started into something about situational awareness. Ryan was going to leave. He had fully made the decision. Emma had 30 minutes left in practice, and there was a bench in the corridor outside Gym B where he could sit and wait. And none of this performing, none of this deliberate small cruelty done up in the language of professionalism was worth his time or energy or the particular flavor of headache that was starting to form behind his left eye. He turned. Gavin grabbed his shoulder, not a light touch, a real grip. Fingers digging in, the pressure of a man who'd learned that physical contact in moments like this communicated dominance more efficiently than words. Ryan went very still. "I'm not done," Gavin said. The room went quiet in a new way. Even the students who'd been half listening suddenly weren't doing anything else. Ryan looked at the hand on his shoulder, then up at Gavin's face. He took a slow breath through his nose and let it out. "Take your hand off me," he said, quietly, completely conversationally, like commenting on the weather. "Or what?" Gavin said. "You're gonna limp at me?" 2 or 3 students made the involuntary sound that people make when they see a car accident. The woman near the back, Ryan would remember her later, small, dark-haired, maybe 35, said, "Gavin, come on." But Gavin wasn't listening. "I'm serious," Gavin said, still with the hand on Ryan's shoulder, his voice shifting now into something that wasn't quite the performance voice anymore, something more personal. "I've been teaching self-defense for 12 years, and I've never once had a guy like you, soft, checked out, can barely walk straight, stand in my gym and act like he's got something to prove. So I want to know, what are you going to do?" Ryan looked at him, and then, and this was the part that nobody in that room expected, Ryan smiled. Not wide, not aggressive, just the quiet, tired, seen-too-much smile of a man who had spent years in situations where other men talked right up until the moment something happened and they stopped talking. He reached up and removed Gavin's hand from his shoulder. Not roughly, precisely. The way you remove something that doesn't belong where it is. "One more time," Ryan said. "Walk away." That was when the gym door swung open. Emma stood in the doorway, volleyball bag over one shoulder, hair still damp from the water she'd splashed on her face after drills. She was wearing the old blue hoodie she'd stolen from Ryan's closet 2 years ago and refused to return. She looked at her father first, then at Gavin's hand, still extended, now empty, then at the room. Emma was 15, but she'd grown up watching her father be quiet in situations that would have made other men loud, and she had developed a very specific radar for what his particular silence meant in a given context. Her jaw set. "Dad," she said carefully, "what's going on?" "Nothing," Ryan said. He didn't look away from Gavin. "Go wait by the car." "Dad." Emma. Still quiet, still not looking at her. "Keys are in my jacket pocket. Go wait by the car." She held for a moment. Ryan could feel it, that 15-year-old war between wanting to argue and knowing better. And then she stepped forward, reached into his jacket pocket without being told which one, found the keys, and walked out without saying anything else. The door swung shut. Gavin watched her go, then turned back to Ryan with the smile reinstalled. "Sweet kid," he said. "How old?" Ryan pulled his jacket off, folded it once, set it on the bleacher seat nearest to him. Then he stepped onto the mat. He didn't take a fighting stance. He didn't square his shoulders or lift his hands or do any of the preparatory theater that signaled this is beginning. He just stood there, weight distributed, hands relaxed at his sides, and looked at Gavin with that same completely neutral expression. Gavin read it as nerves. As a man desperately trying to project calm he didn't have, he was wrong. What he was looking at was a man who had done this, some version of this, in some corner of the world, enough times that the pre-fight adrenaline dump had long since been processed into stillness. What he was looking at was someone who had learned, years ago, in conditions that would have broken most people, to let the body do what the body knew without the brain getting in the way. What Gavin was looking at, though he didn't know it yet, was 11 years of SEAL training, 4 combat deployments, and the specific kind of muscle memory that doesn't leave a man regardless of how many years of grocery runs and school drop-offs and broken appliances pile up on top of it. "All right," Gavin said. He raised his hands into a clean guard position. "Let me show you what a real response capacity looks like." He came forward. Ryan pivoted 3 inches to the left. That was it. 3 inches. A shift so small it barely qualified as movement. Gavin's forward momentum carried him half a step past where Ryan had been, and in that half a step, Ryan's right arm moved. Not a strike, not a shove, something between a redirect and a guide, and Gavin stumbled sideways across the mat, barely catching himself. The room made no sound. Gavin straightened, rolled his neck. His eyes had changed. "Lucky," he said. "Maybe," Ryan said. Gavin came again, faster, tighter, the clean guard replaced by something more serious. He closed the distance with real speed. Ryan waited until the last possible half second, not the second, the half second, the margin that separates a response from a reaction, stepped inside Gavin's guard rather than away from it, controlled the momentum at the elbow and the shoulder, and redirected the whole trajectory downward. Gavin hit the mat on his back with a sound that was part impact and part surprise. He lay there for 2 full seconds. The students didn't move. Ryan waited. Gavin got up. His face had rearranged itself into something that wasn't performing anymore. He looked at Ryan differently. Not respectfully. Not yet. But with the particular recalibration of a man who has just discovered that his original read was wrong and hasn't yet figured out what the correct read is. Then he looked at Ryan's right leg, and Ryan watched him make the decision. It happened fast. Gavin dropped his guard, changed his angle, and drove his right foot into Ryan's prosthetic leg with everything he had. The sound that came back at him was not the sound of bone or muscle or pain. Clang. Metal on carbon fiber. Titanium striking the hard polymer shell of the prosthetic's lower housing. Gavin dropped to one knee, grabbing his foot, face contorted. The sound hung in the gym like something alive. Ryan reached down and rolled up the right leg of his jeans, slowly, deliberately. The way you do something when you want everyone in the room to see it clearly. The prosthetic caught the fluorescent light, graphite-colored carbon fiber, titanium hardware, the articulated ankle joint that his prosthetist in Denver had fitted him with 3 years ago. A piece of engineering that had cost more than his first car and that he had initially resented and gradually come to think of as just part of the deal. He rolled the fabric back down. He looked at Gavin. At the 12 students. At the woman near the back, who was covering her mouth with one hand. Nobody was smirking. Nobody was looking at his leg the way people looked at a weakness. Gavin was still on one knee on the mat, jaw tight, working through the specific humiliation of a man who has just been defeated by the very thing he tried to exploit as a vulnerability. Ryan picked up his jacket from the bleacher, shrugged it on. Real threat assessment, he said quietly, starts with what you don't know. He zipped the jacket halfway. You saw the limp. You built a whole theory on it. And the whole time, he paused. Not for drama, just because the next part needed space around it. The whole time you had no idea what you were actually looking at. He walked toward the door. Behind him, the gym was completely still. He put his hand on the push bar. And then one of the students, a man in his 40s, heavy build, had been standing nearest to the wall the whole time, said something, not loud, almost to himself. Who are you? Ryan didn't answer. He pushed through the door and walked into the corridor, and behind him the door swung shut, and the gym stayed silent. And Gavin Holt was still on one knee on the mat, in a room where 12 people who had once watched him perform authority were now looking at the floor rather than at him. Outside, the cold hit Ryan's face like a clean answer. He walked through the lobby. Travis had looked up from his phone this time, though Ryan didn't stop to explain why, and pushed through the exterior doors into the parking lot. The SUV was idling 20 feet away. Emma had turned the heat on. He could see her in the passenger seat, watching him cross the lot. He didn't change his pace. He didn't perform anything. He just walked in the way he walked, the limp rolling through each step with the particular mechanical rhythm that had become his rhythm. And he opened the driver's side door and got in and shut it behind him. The heater was working. That was a small thing, but not a nothing thing. Emma looked at him. He could feel it. He sat with his hands on the steering wheel for a moment without starting the car. You okay? She said. Yeah. Your jacket's inside out. Ryan looked down. She was right. He'd put it on wrong in the gym and hadn't noticed. He almost laughed. Almost. Are you going to tell me what happened? Emma said. No. Dad. I'll tell you in the car. We're in the car. He started the engine. Ryan Calder, Emma said, in the specific tone that she had inherited directly from her mother, and which Ryan found simultaneously exasperating and devastating. If you drive out of this parking lot without telling me what just happened in there, I will personally— The instructor tried to embarrass me in front of his class, Ryan said. I let him do it for a while. Then he grabbed me. Then I stepped on the mat. Emma was quiet for a moment. And? And nothing. He fell down a couple of times. He kicked my leg and hurt his foot. Another pause. Hurt his foot because— Titanium frame. The sound Emma made was not a laugh. It was the contained, pressurized cousin of a laugh. The sound of something funny, meeting something that wasn't funny, and not being sure which one to be. Ryan pulled the SUV out of the parking space and toward the exit. You're limping worse, Emma said. Cold does that. You're also bleeding. He glanced at the back of his right hand. She was right about that too. Must have caught it on the door handle. He hadn't noticed. A thin line, not serious, already clotting. I'm fine, he said. I know you're fine, Emma said. That's not what I said. Ryan drove out of the parking lot onto the main road, and the Colorado night closed around them, and the heater made its particular hum, and the check engine light glowed its perpetual amber on the dashboard. And he thought about what he was going to say to his daughter about what had just happened. Not the mechanics of it, not the technique, but the part underneath all of that, the part that was harder to put language to. He thought about the moment Gavin's hand had landed on his shoulder, not the grab itself. What the grab was designed to do, the calculus of it, the deliberate, practiced use of physical contact to communicate a message that didn't quite rise to the level of confrontation, but existed in the space just below it, where social pressure operated without accountability. He'd felt that calculation before, in much darker rooms than that gym. He wasn't a bad instructor, Ryan said after a while. Emma looked at him. Technically, his fundamentals were clean. His students were learning something real. He paused, but he couldn't see past what he thought he knew, and that— He took a turn. The SUV's tires complained briefly about the temperature. That gets people hurt. In a gym, someone ends up embarrassed. In other places— He stopped. Emma waited. He called you weak, she said. Not a question. He said a lot of things. Did it bother you? Ryan thought about it honestly. Not the automatic no that the question was designed to produce, but the real answer, which was more complicated. The limp thing? He shook his head slightly. No, I've had the leg for 6 years. I know what it is. I know what I can do with it. Another pause. What bothered me? He glanced at Emma, then back at the road. Was you walking in while he was doing it? Emma looked at her hands. I've had worse said to me, Ryan said, by people in much more serious circumstances. Water off a duck. He didn't make it sound heroic. It wasn't heroic, it was just true. But watching you see it, I've seen people be mean to you before, Emma said. I know. It doesn't break me. I know that too. Then why? Because you shouldn't have to, Ryan said. Flat, final. Not angry. Just the specific exhaustion of a man stating something that shouldn't require stating. You're 15. That's not your weight to carry. Whatever that man wanted to perform in his gym with his students, that's between him and his own life. But you, he exhaled, you walking into that, that's the part I didn't want. Emma was quiet for a long time. Outside, Stonehaven scrolled past. Lit windows, a gas station, the bank with the broken sign that had been broken since they'd moved here 3 years ago and would apparently be broken until the end of recorded time. You know what I actually thought? Emma said. What? When I walked in and saw the room, all those people and the way they were looking, I thought something was wrong. I thought you were in trouble. I was. No, you weren't. Ryan almost smiled. No, not really. I know. Emma pulled her knees up, feet on the dashboard. Ryan didn't tell her not to. He'd stopped telling her not to months ago. I've seen you move. When you think I'm not watching. When you're working in the garage and something falls. The way you just catch it, without thinking. She paused. You don't move like someone who can't protect himself. How do I move? She thought about it. Like someone who already decided what he'd do if something happened. A long time ago. Ryan didn't answer. The road curved left, the mountains invisible in the dark but present in the way large things are always present even when you can't see them. In the shape of the sky, the way the temperature dropped, the particular texture of the silence. Are you going to be in trouble? Emma said. With the rec center? I don't know, maybe. You didn't start it. Doesn't always matter. Emma made a sound that wasn't agreement and wasn't argument. The sound of someone filing information they weren't sure what to do with yet. Ryan turned onto their street. 3 blocks from the house, the check engine light flickered and then stayed on, which was somehow comforting in its consistency. Dad. Yeah. I'm not embarrassed by the leg. I want you to know that. She said it plainly, without the emotional scaffolding that most people built around things like that. Just the statement, clean and direct, the way Emma sometimes said things that reminded Ryan painfully and completely of her mother. I've never been embarrassed by it. I know, Ryan said. You don't act like you know. I know you think I don't act like I know? Emma made a frustrated sound. Ryan allowed himself the full smile this time. You're impossible, she said. Probably. He pulled the SUV into the driveway and shut off the engine. The heater died with it. The Colorado cold pushed immediately against the windows. Ryan sat for a moment. 12 students. A clean mat under fluorescent lights. A man who'd built his identity around being the most capable person in any room he walked into, and who had chosen Ryan Calder, tired, limping, quiet. Ryan Calder, with his old jacket and his cold coffee and his carbon fiber leg, as the prop for the evening's demonstration. He thought about that choice, the logic of it. Pick the person who looks like they won't push back. He thought about Gavin's face when the leg made that sound, that metallic, catastrophic, completely inarguable clang. Something in Ryan's chest settled. Not satisfaction, not quite. More like the feeling of a door closing on a room you were glad to be leaving. He reached for the door handle, and then Emma's phone lit up on the center console between them. A text message preview glowed briefly before the screen dimmed. Ryan saw only 3 words of it before it disappeared. 3 words, from a number he didn't recognize. We need to talk. The screen dimmed and went dark before Ryan could read anything else. He sat with his hand still on the door handle and looked at Emma's phone on the center console. Emma hadn't moved. She was looking at it too, in the particular way teenagers look at something they're pretending not to look at. Eyes slightly averted, chin angled away, every other signal screaming awareness. "Who's that?" Ryan said. "Nobody." "Emma." "It's nobody, Dad. Can we just go inside? I'm hungry." She picked up the phone before he could say anything else and dropped it into her volleyball bag. And then she was out of the car and walking toward the front door with the specific velocity of someone who doesn't want to be asked follow-up questions. Ryan sat in the cold car for a moment longer. "We need to talk." 3 words, unknown number, his daughter reading it and immediately putting it away. He got out of the car. He told himself it was nothing. 15-year-olds got texts at weird hours from weird numbers all the time. It was the nature of being 15 in the current century. The social ecosystem was enormous and incomprehensible, and Ryan had largely accepted that he would never fully map it, only monitor the edges for things that looked wrong. He told himself that. He almost believed it. The house was the particular kind of small that stopped bothering you once you'd lived in it long enough. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a kitchen that shared breathing room with the dining area, and a living room that worked fine as long as nobody had more than 4 people over, which they never did. Ryan had moved them here 3 years ago from Pueblo, when the contracting job with Meridian Security Systems had come through. Private sector work that used maybe 15% of his actual skill set and paid him well enough to stay out of debt, which was the negotiation he'd made with himself at 36 and had more or less stuck to. The job was logistics consulting. Threat assessment on paper. Reviewing security protocols for corporate clients who wanted the credibility of a former special operator on their liability paperwork without actually having to think too hard about what that meant. Ryan was good at it because it required almost nothing of him emotionally and because he could do most of it from his home office without having to talk to very many people. He'd been in situations that required everything of him. These days he preferred situations that required almost nothing. Emma had protested the move initially, loudly, repeatedly, with the specific rhetorical sophistication of a 12-year-old who has inherited her mother's argumentative intelligence, and then had adapted within 6 weeks the way kids do, and had never mentioned Pueblo again. He heated up the leftover chicken and rice he'd made Sunday. Tuesday was always leftover night, a fact Emma accepted with the weary tolerance of someone who has given up on changing a system. And they ate at the kitchen table with the television off, which was another system Emma had given up on. She was on her phone through most of dinner. Ryan didn't push the text message thing. He thought about it, turned it over, set it aside. After dinner, she helped him with the dishes without being asked, which meant something was on her mind. Emma helped with dishes voluntarily approximately 4 times a year, and each time corresponded to a period of mental processing that she wasn't ready to externalize yet. Ryan washed. She dried. The kitchen was too small for that arrangement to be efficient, but they'd been doing it since she was 9, and efficiency wasn't the point. "Coach Briggs says I might start in the next home game," Emma said. "Yeah? That's good." I mean, she didn't say that exactly. She said she was considering her options for the rotation. But Jalen told me that's what she says right before she makes a change. "Then that's good." Emma dried a bowl and stacked it. "You're not going to ask me how I feel about that?" "How do you feel about it?" "Nervous. Obviously." "Obviously," Ryan agreed. "You'll be fine." "You always say that." "Because it's always true." Emma made the frustrated sound again. The one he liked, even though she would have found it baffling and probably offensive to know that. It was the sound of someone who was okay enough to be frustrated about small things, and that was a good sound. That was the sound he'd spent years trying to make possible for her. She handed him the last dish to rinse. Their hands brushed in the handoff, her fingers briefly cold from the dishwater. "Dad," she said. "Hmm?" "That man tonight, the instructor." A pause. She was working towards something and doing it at her own pace, which Ryan had learned years ago was the only pace worth waiting for. "Has anyone ever come after you like that before? For the leg?" Ryan thought about honesty versus simplicity and landed somewhere between. "A few times," he said. "What did you do?" "Depends on the situation. Tonight you stepped on the mat." "Tonight the situation called for stepping on the mat. What did other situations call for?" Ryan turned the water off and dried his hands on the dish towel. Walking away. Most walking away. He folded the towel and hung it on the oven handle. The mat's a last resort, Em. Always. She looked at him. 15 years old and already had his number in a way that made him simultaneously proud and slightly terrified. But you knew when you stepped out there. You weren't scared. I was a little scared. You weren't. Of hurting him more than I meant to, Ryan said. That's the thing people don't understand about. He stopped, rephrased. When you know you can handle something, the fear shifts. You stop being afraid of losing. You start being afraid of going too far. Emma absorbed that. Put it somewhere. Okay, she said. That was it, just okay. But she said it in the tone of someone who had gotten the answer she was looking for. And Ryan recognized that tone because her mother had used it exactly the same way, and it had always meant the same thing. I needed to hear that, and I'm not going to tell you why. I was at his desk at 10:45 p.m. when his phone rang. Not a number he had saved. Colorado area code, 719 prefix, Stonehaven local. He looked at it for 2 rings, then answered, Ryan Calder. Mr. Calder. A woman's voice, measured, professional, with the specific neutrality of someone who made uncomfortable calls regularly and had developed a technique for it. This is Diane Pruitt, Facilities Director at Westbrook Recreation Center. I'm sorry to call this late. Do you have a moment? Ryan leaned back in his chair. Sure. I'm calling because we had an incident this evening in Gym A during the adult self-defense program. I understand you were involved. I was there. I've spoken with several witnesses already, and I want to be clear. I'm not calling to place blame. I'm gathering information. A brief pause. Can you walk me through what happened from your perspective? Ryan walked her through it. He was precise, specific, and entirely factual, and he did not editorialize. He'd been trained to write after-action reports, stripped-down chronological accounts that captured events without interpretation, and the habit had survived intact into civilian life, where it sometimes made therapists uncomfortable and usually made administrators very comfortable. He described the initial contact in the doorway, Gavin's escalating commentary to the class, the shoulder grab, his request for Gavin to step back, and the subsequent 2 exchanges on the mat. When he finished, there was a pause. The witnesses I spoke with described it essentially the same way, Pruitt said. A few of them were actually... Another pause. A careful one. They were quite emphatic about Mr. Holt's behavior leading up to the physical contact. He runs a good program, Ryan said. Technically. There was a brief silence. We'll be reviewing Mr. Holt's contract, Pruitt said. I want to let you know that before you hear it elsewhere. And I want to apologize on behalf of the center for what you experienced this evening. I appreciate that, Ryan said. It's not necessary, but I appreciate it. Do you intend to file a formal complaint? Ryan thought about it. The question was legitimate. He'd been grabbed by a man who'd been doing it under color of authority in a public space. He had grounds. No, he said. I don't think so. That's your right. If you change your mind, I'll let you know. He ended the call and looked at his desk, an open laptop, a half-finished threat assessment for a pharmaceutical company in Boulder that he needed to complete by Thursday, a cold cup of coffee, his second cold cup of the day, that he'd been meaning to reheat for 2 hours. He reheated the coffee. I didn't go back to the assessment. I was up at 5:30, which was when he was always up. The body didn't care that there was no reason for it anymore. Didn't care that no instructor was going to drag him out of a rack at 0500. Didn't care that the operational rhythm that had structured his life for 11 years had ended. The body remembered. The body got up. He made coffee. Real coffee, first cup of the day, which was the only coffee he actually liked. He stood at the kitchen window and drank it, while the neighborhood did the specific nothing it did at 5:30 in February, which was exist quietly under a sky that hadn't fully committed to being morning yet. He thought about the text on Emma's phone. We need to talk. He thought about the unknown number. He thought about how she'd picked it up immediately, without looking at who it was from. That was the detail that had lodged. Not the words, but the speed of the response. The automatic reach. Like she'd been expecting it. He was probably wrong. He was probably a father extrapolating from incomplete information, which was a particular hazard of his professional training applied to personal contexts. Pattern recognition was useful in the field. Applied to your own teenager, it mostly just made you paranoid. Probably. He drank his coffee. At 6:15, he heard Emma's alarm through the ceiling, muffled and twice snoozed, and by 6:45, she was downstairs in her school uniform, looking approximately like someone had poured her out of a bag, which was how she always looked before 7 a.m. And Ryan had eggs and toast ready, which was how Wednesdays always worked. She ate. She was on her phone. She didn't mention last night. He drove her to school. It was a 12-minute drive, and for the first 9 of those minutes, they talked about nothing in particular. Her history test on Friday, whether the check engine light was a serious orange or a normal orange. Ryan confirmed it was normal orange, which Emma accepted with deep skepticism. And a brief editorial on Emma's part about the school's new policy on in-class phone use, which she opposed on the grounds that it was totalitarian, which Ryan thought was a bit much. 3 minutes from school, Emma said, "Don't do anything about last night, okay?" "What do you mean?" "Like, don't call the rec center or make a complaint or whatever. Just let it be a thing that happened." Ryan glanced at her. "They already called me." Emma's head turned fast. "Who called you?" "The facilities director, last night." "What did you... I told her I didn't plan to file a complaint." Emma relaxed slightly. Then, "Why did they call you?" "Witnesses," Ryan said simply. Another silence. A different texture than the earlier ones. She was processing something about what witnesses meant, about the fact that other people in that room had apparently decided something needed to be reported without being asked. "Was it a lot of people?" she said. "I don't know. She didn't specify." They pulled up in front of the school. Emma's door was already halfway open before the car fully stopped. The impatience of someone who's late slightly more often than they intend to be. And then she paused with one foot out and turned back. "Hey," she said. "Yeah." "The instructor, Holt. Do you think he does that to everyone?" Ryan thought about the students near the wall, the woman who'd tried to intervene, the man in his 40s who'd asked who Ryan was as he left. "I think he does it to whoever he thinks won't push back," Ryan said. Emma held that for a second. "That's worse," she said. "Yeah," Ryan said. "It is." She got out. He watched her cross the walkway toward the entrance, backpack shifting on her shoulders, already looking at her phone again, and then the school doors swallowed her and the drop-off line behind him began making its opinion known, and he pulled forward. I was 3 hours into the pharmaceutical assessment when the email came. Subject line, "Last night, Westbrook," from one of Holt's students. The address was a personal Gmail. The name in the address field read M. Carter. Ryan opened it. "Mr. Calder, I know this is probably weird to receive from a stranger. I got your contact from Travis at the rec center front desk. He recognized you from the sign-in sheet and gave it to me after I explained why I was asking. I realized that might sound strange. I was in Holt's class last night. I've been in it for 4 months. I want to say something I probably should have said a long time ago to someone, and I'm not sure why I'm saying it to you, except that you seem like someone who might understand. What happened last night wasn't unusual for him. The targeting of someone. The way he does it in front of the class like it's a teaching tool. I've seen him do it to 6 different people in the 4 months I've been enrolled. Usually it's someone who's new, or someone who looks nervous, or someone he's decided is an easy mark. Usually it doesn't go as far as it went last night because usually the person just takes it and leaves. You didn't. And I don't know what your background is, but I've trained at 3 different gyms in this city, and I've never seen anyone move the way you moved. Not even close. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that you weren't imagining it. He's been doing this for a long time, and the rest of us who saw it are angry and embarrassed that we didn't say something sooner. Miles Carter. P.S. He's been using the same speech, the threat assessment compromised gait line, for months. He used almost those exact words on a woman with a cane back in November. She never came back. Ryan read the email twice. Then he put his phone face down on the desk and looked at the wall. The woman with the cane, back in November. He felt something move in his chest that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite sadness, and lived in the specific territory between the two. The feeling that came from hearing that something you'd suspected was true, and that the true version was worse than the version you'd been willing to let yourself consider. He picked up his phone and replied, "Mr. Carter, thank you for this. I appreciate you reaching out. I'd encourage you to share what you've told me with the facilities director at Westbrook, Diane Pruitt. She's already in the process of reviewing Holt's contract. Your account, and anyone else's, would be relevant to that review. Ryan Calder. He sent it, went back to the pharmaceutical assessment, stared at it, closed the laptop. He got up, walked to the kitchen, and stood at the counter for a moment looking at nothing. Then he pulled his jacket off the hook by the door and went out to the garage. The garage was technically a two-car garage that functioned as a one-car garage because the second bay was where Ryan put things. A workbench along the back wall, a pegboard with tools hung in the specific configuration he liked, a folding chair he used when a job was taking a long time, and in the corner, a heavy bag hanging from a crossbeam he'd bolted in himself. He put on the thin work gloves he kept on the bench. No wraps. He wasn't planning on going hard. His hands were already banged up from the door handle, and he stood in front of the bag for a moment. He hit it, slowly at first, finding the rhythm of it, the way you do when your body is working out something the brain hasn't fully articulated yet. The bag swayed. His weight shifted, left, right, the carbon fiber ankle doing its job in the cold with a slight stiffness he'd learned to work around. He thought about the woman with the cane. He hit the bag harder. He thought about Gavin Holt's voice expanding to fill the gym. The performance of it, the specificity of who he chose, the way his eyes had landed on Ryan with the casual calculation of a man who'd done this enough to have a methodology for it. He thought about the 12 students. 4 months. 6 people. He hit the bag harder. He worked for 20 minutes. Not the controlled technical work he'd do if he were actually training. This was something else, something more biological. The body demanding a channel for a thing the mind didn't have words for yet. He stopped, rested his forearms against the bag, let it hold some of his weight for a moment. His breathing steadied. The garage smelled like cold oil and sawdust and old rubber. He'd always liked that smell. It was uncomplicated. He pulled the gloves off, walked back inside, and checked his phone. A reply from Miles Carter, sent 4 minutes after Ryan's. I'll contact her today. A few others said they'd be willing to do the same. I think there might be more people who stopped coming to class because of him. I'm going to reach out to a couple of them. Can I ask you something? You don't have to answer. What did you do before? Before whatever you do now, I mean. The way you handled last night. That's not something you learn at a civilian gym. Ryan stared at the message for a long moment. He typed, nothing worth talking about, then deleted it. He typed, military, a long time ago, then deleted that too. He put the phone down without replying and went upstairs to shower. I was in the produce section of a grocery store on Cedar Street at 4:15 p.m. when someone said his name. He turned. The man was broad-shouldered, somewhere in his early 40s, with the look of someone who worked outside, weathered in the face, hands that had some history in them. Ryan recognized him from the gym the night before. He'd been standing near the wall. He was the one who'd asked the question, "Who are you?" as Ryan had walked out. "Hey," the man said. He had a basket with eggs and bread in it, and he was holding it with both hands in the specific way of someone who isn't sure if a conversation is going to happen and is prepared for it not to. "You're the guy from last night, Westbrook." "Yeah," Ryan said. "Miles Carter." He shifted the basket to his left hand and extended his right. They shook. "I emailed you earlier." Ryan looked at him. "You worked fast." "Once I knew who you were, Travis told me your name, and I just..." Miles seemed to realize he was explaining himself more than the situation required. He stopped. "I wanted to say it in person, what I put in the email." "You already said it." "I know, but..." Miles looked at the produce display briefly, like it might offer him something, then back at Ryan. "There's a woman named Patricia Walsh. She was in the class back in the fall. Holt did the same thing to her. Actually, it was worse. He had 2 of his more advanced students physically demonstrate on her in front of the class, supposedly to show how a smaller person with limited mobility would fare against a real attacker. She has MS. She told me afterwards she'd never felt so..." He stopped. "Anyway, she's willing to talk to the facilities director. She was just scared it wouldn't matter." Ryan held a bell pepper without looking at it. "It'll matter," he said. "How do you know?" "Because there's documentation now. Multiple accounts, consistent pattern on over multiple months. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a policy liability." He set the pepper in his basket. It'll matter. Miles looked at him with the particular expression of someone who has said the same thing to themselves and heard it back from someone else and found it more convincing in the second version. Okay, he said. You did the right thing reaching out, Ryan said. I should have done it 4 months ago. You did it today. That's the part that changes anything. Miles nodded. He wasn't entirely satisfied with that. Ryan could see it, the self-recrimination that wanted more space than it was getting. But he was a grown man, and he'd find his own way to process it. Can I ask you? Miles started. No, Ryan said. Not unkindly. Miles blinked. Whatever you were going to ask about where I trained or what I did, Ryan said. It doesn't matter for any of this. What matters is that Pruitt has the accounts she needs. A beat. Fair enough, Miles said. Good. Ryan moved down the aisle, then stopped, turned back. Miles. Yeah? The woman with the MS, Patricia Walsh. Yeah? Make sure she knows it wasn't her fault she left. Holt made an environment where leaving felt like the only option. That's on him. Ryan held Miles' gaze. She didn't do anything wrong by walking out. Make sure she knows that. Miles looked at him for a moment, then nodded. Ryan turned and finished his shopping. Look, I was making dinner when Emma came home. Not leftover night. It was Wednesday, which was pasta night, because Emma had declared it pasta night 3 years ago, and it had become law. And she dropped her bag in the hallway and came into the kitchen and sat at the table and said nothing, which was the specific kind of nothing that meant something. Ryan stirred the sauce. Waited. Brianna's brother got suspended today, Emma said. Who's Brianna? From my English class. Her brother's a junior. He got suspended for… It doesn't matter why. A pause. She was really upset. We talked at lunch. Ryan reached past the stove for the salt. That's good, that you talked to her. She doesn't have a lot of friends. Emma turned a pen over on the table, clicked it, stopped. I mean, she has friends, but not people who actually sit down, you know? Most people did the thing where they acknowledged it happened and then moved on because it wasn't their problem. But you didn't. I just sat down, Emma said, like it wasn't a decision. It's not a big thing. Ryan looked at her briefly across the kitchen. She was looking at the table. It is, though, he said. Emma didn't answer. She picked up her pen and turned it again. And Ryan went back to the pasta, and the sauce made its comfortable sound against the bottom of the pan. And the kitchen was warm in the way kitchens got warm when the outside was cold, and something was cooking on the stove. He set the plates out. Emma helped without being asked. They ate. At some point during the meal, over a minor argument about whether the pasta needed more cheese, which it did, which Emma won, Ryan felt the day shift slightly in his chest. The email from Miles. The grocery store. The garage this morning and the bag swaying under his hands. It settled. Not resolved, just settled. He'd spent 6 years learning to tell the difference. After dinner, Emma went upstairs to do homework, and Ryan cleaned up alone, and at 8 p.m. he sat down at his desk and reopened the pharmaceutical assessment and worked until 10:30 with a focused steadiness that surprised him slightly. He went to bed at 11. At 11:47, his phone lit up on the nightstand. Not a call. A text. Different unknown number than the one that had appeared on Emma's phone the night before, but same area code, same 719 prefix. He looked at the message. You should know that Gavin Holt is not the kind of man who takes what happened last night without a response. We trained together for 3 years before I realized what he was. Watch your daughter. Ryan sat up in the dark room and read the message twice. Then he read it a third time. He sat there in the dark for a long time without moving, the screen dimming and then going black in his hand, the house quiet around him with the particular quiet of a place where one other person was asleep, and the whole weight of that person's safety pressed, invisible and enormous, against the inside of his chest. He got up. He moved through the dark house to Emma's room without turning on any lights. He'd navigated worse than a dark hallway. He eased her door open a few inches. She was asleep on her side, facing the window, one hand under her pillow, the way she'd slept since she was 4 years old. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, screen dark. Ryan stood in the doorway for a moment. He pulled the door closed softly. He went back to his room, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at the dark screen of his phone. Watch your daughter. He thought about Gavin Holt in the gym, the way his eyes had followed Emma when she walked in, clocking her, cataloging her, the way certain kinds of men automatically cataloged the people adjacent to the person they were targeting. He hadn't registered it as deliberate at the time. He registered it now. He made himself breathe steadily. He was good at threat assessment. He'd built a career on it. And the first rule of threat assessment, one he'd had beaten into him over years of training and reinforced over years of application in places where being wrong meant something permanent, was this: don't dismiss the thing you don't want to be true. He read the message one more time. Then he opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in almost 2 years. He looked at it, thumb hovering. He put the phone down. He'd see what tomorrow brought. But he didn't go back to sleep. I was still sitting on the edge of the bed at 1 a.m. when he heard the noise. Not a dramatic noise. Not glass breaking or doors slamming or any of the cinematic signals that tell you something is wrong. Just a sound that didn't belong. A soft scrape from the side of the house. The kind a boot makes when it catches the corner of something in the dark. Ryan was off the bed before he'd consciously processed what he'd heard. This was the thing civilians never understood about men who'd spent years doing what he'd done. It wasn't that they were braver or calmer or more in control. It was that the threat response pathway had been compressed over years of training until it operated below the level of thought. The sound happened, and his body responded, and his brain caught up somewhere in the middle. He was at the window in 4 steps, standing to the side of the frame, not in front of it. He pulled the edge of the curtain back 2 inches. The side yard was dark. The motion sensor light on the garage hadn't triggered. He scanned left to right, taking his time, not rushing the look the way people rushed looks when they were scared and wanted the yard to be empty. Nothing. He held the position for 30 seconds. 40. The yard stayed empty. The neighborhood stayed quiet. A car passed on the street 2 blocks over, headlights grazing the top of the fence line, and then it was gone. Ryan let the curtain fall. He stood in the dark room and breathed. It could have been an animal. It probably was an animal. Raccoons came through the side yard sometimes, got into the space between the fence and the garage wall where Ryan kept the trash cans. The sound was consistent with that. He knew all of this. He also knew that we need to talk and watch your daughter had been delivered in the last 18 hours, and that his threat assessment brain, the one he couldn't turn off even when he wanted to, was currently running at a higher baseline than it had in a long time. He went back to bed. He lay there with his eyes open and listened to the house for another 40 minutes before he finally slept. Thursday morning arrived gray and unremarkable. The sky, the flat white of a sheet of printer paper, the kind of February sky that committed to nothing. Ryan made coffee, packed Emma's lunch, turkey on whole wheat, apple, the specific brand of chips she'd eat only on Thursdays, a system he'd stopped questioning, and drove her to school in the check-engine SUV. She was half asleep for the whole drive. Ryan let her be. When she got out at the school entrance, she paused with her hand on the door. "You look tired," she said. "I'm fine." She looked at him with the evaluating precision of someone who had been reading his face since she was 4 years old. "Did you sleep?" "Some." "Dad, have a good day, Em." She held for a beat, clearly calculating whether this was a fight worth having at 7:43 a.m. in a school drop-off line with 12 cars behind them. She made the right call. "I'll text you when practice ends," she said. "I'll be there." She got out. He watched her go. He waited until she was through the doors before he pulled forward. He called the number from the previous night's text at 8:15 a.m., sitting in his home office with the door closed and the rest of the house empty. It rang twice. "I didn't think you'd call," said a woman's voice. "Who is this?" A pause. "My name is Dana Reyes. I used to train with Gavin. About 2 years before—" She stopped, reorganized. "Before I understood what kind of person he was. I left the program. He didn't take it well." "How did you get my number?" "Miles Carter. He told me what happened at Westbrook. I asked if he had your contact." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath the steadiness, not fear exactly, but the particular tension of someone who has made a decision they're not entirely sure about yet. "I meant what I texted. Gavin doesn't— when someone embarrasses him, he doesn't process it and move on. He thinks in terms of settling things." "Has he done something like this before, after being removed from a program?" He wasn't officially removed from anything before. Most places just let him quietly not renew. This is different. He was removed, in front of witnesses. And the reason? Another pause. The reason the witnesses are all talking is because of you. In his mind, that makes you responsible. Ryan leaned back in his chair. He was looking at the wall but not seeing it. You said, "Watch my daughter," he said. I said that because Emma came up, yesterday, in a conversation he had with one of his current students, someone who's still loyal to him and who I still have contact with. She hesitated. He was at the rec center yesterday afternoon, spoke with Travis at the front desk, asked about you. Travis didn't tell him much, but the sign-in sheet from Tuesday has your name and the time and the fact that you signed in for volleyball pickup. Ryan went very still. That's specific, he said, carefully. I know. He went to the rec center yesterday. Yes. Ryan was quiet for a moment. He was running through the timeline, laying it against the noise from last night, the scrape from the side of the house, the motion sensor that hadn't triggered. Is he unstable? Ryan said. Or is he calculating? The distinction mattered. Unstable meant unpredictable escalation with poor planning. Calculating meant methodical, patient, willing to wait for the right moment. Dana took a moment to answer, which was itself an answer. Both, she said. He's calculating until he isn't. When he crosses a line, he crosses it completely, and then he justifies it afterward. That's the pattern. Have you been to the police with any of this? What would I tell them? He talked about you. He asked a rec center employee a question? He hasn't done anything yet. No, Ryan said. Not yet. He thought about Emma asleep on her side, one hand under her pillow. He thought about the volleyball schedule on the refrigerator. Home game Friday, practice Tuesday and Thursday, tournament in 2 weeks. He thought about all the places in her week where she was in a public space without him, and how none of that had ever felt like a problem before. Dana, he said, I need you to tell me everything you know about his habits, where he trains now, where he lives if you know it, who his current students are, and whether any of them are the type to take direction from him on something that crosses a legal line. She was quiet for a second. You're not going to the police. I'm going to the police, Ryan said, and I'm also going to do this. Another pause. Then she said, okay, and she told him. He spent the next 4 hours at his desk, and not at his desk. He filed an incident report with the Stonehaven PD online portal. Detailed, factual, the full Tuesday account, plus the text message from Dana, plus a note about Holt accessing Resi Center records through the front desk. He knew what the responding officer would likely tell him. Insufficient grounds for any action, no credible threat had been made, here's a case number, contact us if something escalates. He knew this not from pessimism, but from having worked adjacent to law enforcement long enough to understand what the threshold for action actually was. He filed the report anyway. Establishing a paper trail was basic. While that was pending, he opened a browser window and pulled up everything publicly accessible on Gavin Holt. Business registration for Holt Defense Systems, filed 18 months ago. An address on Meridian Road, Industrial District, which was probably his training facility rather than a residence. A social media presence, photos of classes, promotional content, the particular brand of tactical adjacent personal branding that certain kinds of instructors cultivated. Posts going back 3 years. Nothing actionable. Nothing that told you anything you couldn't already infer from the man's behavior in a gymnasium. He cross-referenced the Meridian Road address against the county property records database. Another old habit, the kind of research that his Meridian security job legitimized, even when the subject was personal. Commercial lease, not ownership. The space was a converted warehouse unit, about 2,400 square feet based on the lease filing. That was a real training facility, not a side operation, a main operation, which meant Holt had more students than the Westbrook Rec Center class, more people in his orbit, more potential sources of both support and direction. Ryan made notes, not on a computer. In the small spiral-bound notebook he kept in the top left desk drawer, handwritten, the way he'd been taught to keep operational notes in environments where electronics weren't reliable. He called his neighbor Barbara Holt. No relation, the name was a coincidence he found unpleasant in this specific context, and asked if she could collect Emma from school today and keep her until Ryan arrived. Barbara was 72, retired, grew tomatoes in the summer, and had been collecting Emma from school on Ryan's difficult workdays for 2 years without ever once asking why. "Of course," Barbara said. "I'll make her eat something. She never eats enough." "She'll argue about it," Ryan said. "Children argue. I'll make her eat anyway." He ended the call and texted Emma. "Change of plan. Mrs. H is picking you up today. I'll explain tonight. You're fine, nothing's wrong, just a schedule thing." Emma texted back 4 minutes later. "Okay, but you're being weird." He responded, "I know, Barbara's making food." Emma, "Okay, I forgive you." He set the phone down. But he drove to Meridian Road at 2 p.m. He parked 2 blocks north of the address, walked the remaining distance on the opposite side of the street, and did what he'd spent years doing in places considerably more hostile than an industrial district in a mid-sized Colorado city, he observed. The facility was a converted warehouse unit, beige exterior, a hand-painted sign above the door that read, "Holt Defense Systems" in block letters, with a silhouette of a figure in a fighting stance beneath it. 2 vehicles in the small lot in front, a dark blue pickup and a silver sedan. The front windows were covered with black vinyl. 1 exterior camera above the door, angled to cover the entrance and the lot. Ryan walked past at a normal pace without looking directly at the entrance. Filed the camera angle. Continued half a block, turned at the corner, and circled back around to the rear of the block through the adjacent alley. The rear of the building had a single metal door, no camera. 2 dumpsters against the back wall. The door was closed but not visibly padlocked. He didn't stop. He kept walking, made the full circuit back to his car, got in, and sat. He wasn't there to confront anyone. He'd been clear with himself about that. This was information gathering, the same thing he'd do for a client assessment, nothing more. Know the terrain, know the exits, know where the cameras were and where they weren't. Because the text from Dana had said calculating, and calculating people made plans, and plans had locations, and Ryan had spent enough of his professional life thinking 3 moves ahead to know that the best position in any developing situation was informed. He drove home. Barbara's house smelled like pot roast, and Emma was at the kitchen table doing homework when Ryan arrived at 4:30, which was an image so ordinary it almost made him laugh. Emma looked up, read his face, the homework closed. "Sit down," she said. "I'm fine." "You've said that 4 times in 2 days, and you don't look fine any of the times. Sit down, Dad." He sat. Barbara appeared from the direction of the kitchen with a coffee mug and set it in front of him without saying anything, which was one of the many reasons Ryan genuinely liked her. Emma waited until Barbara had retreated back to her kitchen. "Tell me," Emma said. Ryan looked at her across the table. 15 years old. He thought about all the things he'd shielded her from over the years, all the edited versions of things that he'd handed her because the unedited versions weren't things a kid needed to carry. He thought about whether this was one of those things. He decided it wasn't. Not because she was old enough for it in the abstract, but because she was already in it. She'd been in it since Tuesday night in the parking lot when she'd gotten into the car and asked if he was okay. And giving her the edited version now meant letting her walk around with incomplete information in a situation where incomplete information was a liability. "The instructor from Tuesday," Ryan said. "Holt. He's been making some noise since he was removed from the rec center program." Emma's expression didn't change. "What kind of noise?" "Someone who used to train with him reached out to warn me. He went to Westbrook yesterday and asked about me. He mentioned you in a conversation with one of his students." The thing Emma's face did then was not the thing Ryan had expected. He'd expected fear, or the performance of not fear, that teenagers did when they were scared and didn't want to admit it. He'd expected some version of upset. What he got instead was a focused, quiet anger that looked very much like his own face when he was deciding something. "Mention me how?" she said. "I don't know the exact words, but he knows my name. He probably read the sign-in sheet at Westbrook. You pick up from Westbrook on Tuesdays. It connects." Emma was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "I've already filed a police report. I know where his facility is. I know his pattern from a former student's account. I'm going to keep you close until I understand how serious this actually is." "And if it's serious?" Ryan looked at his daughter. "Then I'll handle it." Emma held his gaze. She was searching for something. Reassurance, maybe, or its opposite, a sign that he was downplaying. She must not have found either, because she eventually just nodded, and her jaw set in the same way it had set on Tuesday when she'd walked into the gym and understood immediately what was happening. Okay, she said. You're not going to argue with me about anything I ask you to do for the next few days. That depends on what you ask. Emma. Dad. I'll be careful. I'm not going to walk home alone or whatever. I get it. But I'm not going to... She stopped. Organized. I'm not going to let this turn into me being scared of every parking lot. That's not what I'm asking for. Good. Because that's not going to happen. Ryan drank the coffee Barbara had left him. It was strong and slightly overbrewed, and he appreciated both qualities. You did something today, Emma said. It wasn't a question. Reconnaissance, Ryan said. Information gathering. You drove to his facility. He looked at her. She looked back. You know, for a kid who never wants to have serious conversations before 8 a.m., he said, you're remarkably perceptive. I get it from Mom, Emma said. That landed. It always landed. Emma said it without cruelty. Just fact, comfortable with it in the way she'd gotten comfortable with most things about her mother's absence over years of quiet processing that Ryan had tried to support without fully being able to access. Yeah, Ryan said. You do. Friday passed without incident. Emma's volleyball team won their home game. Ryan sat in the third row of the bleachers and watched his daughter start for the first time, and she played well. Not perfectly. She shanked a serve in the second set that she'd have been furious about later. But, well, with a particular composure at the net that made him think the nerves she'd described on Wednesday had been processed into something useful. He spent most of the game with his back to the wall and a sightline to both gymnasium entrances, which was not the way he wanted to watch his daughter play volleyball, but it was the way he was going to watch it this week. Nothing happened. He drove her home. She was happy in the way athletes are happy after a win. Not ecstatic, just settled, running through the game in her head with the analytical satisfaction of someone who takes the sport seriously enough to be their own critic. The shank in set 2, she said. I saw it. I dropped my elbow. I know. Don't tell me it was fine. I wasn't going to, Ryan said. Work on the elbow. Emma smiled at the windshield. It was the specific smile she got when he didn't treat her like she needed protecting from the truth about her own performance, and it was one of his favorite expressions she made. Saturday was grocery run, laundry, the pharmaceutical assessment completed and filed, a 40-minute session with the heavy bag in the garage, where Ryan worked with more deliberateness than he had on Wednesday, technique over emotion this time, drilling movement patterns that his body knew but that needed periodically maintained like any precision equipment. He worked on footwork specifically. The prosthetic performed differently in cold. The polymer components stiffened. The ankle articulation required slightly more deliberate weight transfer. He'd adapted over 6 years, but adaptation required maintenance. He didn't hear from Dana Reyes. He didn't hear from Gavin Holt. The silence was the kind that made the back of Ryan's neck feel like a barometric instrument, pressure building in it even when the sky looked clear. Sunday afternoon, he was in the living room with a book he wasn't reading when his phone rang. Stonehaven PD. He answered immediately. Mr. Calder? This is Officer Denise Walsh from Stonehaven PD. I'm calling about the incident report you filed Thursday. She had a professional voice that was also genuinely human, which Ryan appreciated. I want to let you know we've reviewed your report and we've made initial contact with Mr. Holt. Ryan straightened. When? Yesterday afternoon. A detective from our Community Threat Management Unit visited his facility on Meridian Road. We explained that a report had been filed and that any contact with you or your daughter, direct or indirect, would be taken seriously. How did he respond? A brief pause that told Ryan something. He was cooperative. He characterized the incident at Westbrook as a mutual sparring session that was being misrepresented. He did not issue any direct threats during the contact. But our detective noted that his manner was another careful pause. The word she used in her notes was rehearsed. He had a prepared version of events that he delivered very cleanly. That's not necessarily significant on its own. No, Ryan said, but it's notable. We're keeping the report open. I'd encourage you to document anything you see that seems connected, any contact, any vehicles you don't recognize near your address, anything that feels off. We can't act on a feeling, but documentation matters if something develops. I understand, Ryan said. Thank you, Officer Walsh. Take care of yourself, Mr. Calder. He ended the call. Rehearsed. He sat with that word for a moment. A man who'd had 48 hours to construct a narrative. A man who, if Dana Reyes Reed was right, operated in the calculating register until something tipped him into the other one. Ryan got up, walked to the front window, looked out at the quiet Sunday street. The dark blue pickup from Holt's facility lot was parked across the street, 4 houses down. Ryan stood very still. He looked at it without appearing to look at it, the old, unfocused gaze technique that let you observe a target without triggering the social instinct that made people feel watched. The truck was occupied. One figure in the driver's seat, not moving. Ryan checked his watch, 3:22 p.m. He'd been standing at the window for 11 seconds. He stepped back from the glass and moved to the side wall, out of the sight line from the street. He breathed. Options. He ran them fast and clean the way he'd been trained to run them. Not catastrophizing, not minimizing, just the actual available options in the actual current situation laid out in order of priority. He could call 911, tell them there was a vehicle he believed was connected to a filed report, occupied stationary outside his home. Response time was probably 8 minutes. By the time they arrived, the truck would either still be there, which gave him documentation, or it would be gone, which gave him nothing. He could go outside, walk toward the truck, read the plate, let the occupants see him see them. Risky. If Holt was in the truck, or if whoever Holt had sent was the type to interpret direct approach as escalation, the front yard of his house with Emma inside was not the place to find out. He could do nothing and wait. None of the options were clean. None of them were perfect. He went to Emma's room, knocked twice. Yeah. He opened the door. She was at her desk with headphones on, studying. She pulled the headphones down. I need you to stay in your room for a bit, he said. She read his face. The headphones came all the way off. What's happening? Probably nothing. Stay here, away from the window. Dad, Emma. He held her gaze, not urgently, firmly. The specific tone that he almost never used, calm on the surface but freighted below it. The tone that meant this is not negotiable, and I need you to trust me right now. I need 5 minutes. Stay away from the window. She held for 1 second. 2. Okay, she said. He went back to the hallway, grabbed his phone and went to the kitchen, rear of the house, no sightline from the street, and dialed the number he'd been hovering over for 2 days. It rang 3 times. Calder. The voice was the same as it had been 2 years ago. Gravel over quiet authority. Sergeant Major Elliot Doss, retired, living 40 minutes outside of Stonehaven, who Ryan had served 2 deployments with and who had never once in 20 years of acquaintance asked Ryan why he was calling or made him explain himself before getting to the point. I've got a situation, Ryan said. Talk. Ryan talked. 80 seconds, the whole thing, efficient and chronological. Doss listened without interrupting, which was his gift. The ability to receive information completely before processing it. When Ryan finished, there was a brief silence. You want eyes on the truck, Doss said. I want to know who's in it without them knowing I'm looking. I'm 40 minutes out. I know, that's too long. Ryan was already thinking past it. I just needed to loop someone in. If something happens, nothing's going to happen, Doss said. It wasn't a reassurance. It was a tactical statement. Not in daylight, in a residential street, when he knows a police report exists. He's watching. That's what this is. He wants to know if you're scared. Ryan looked at the kitchen floor. Yeah, he said. I know. So don't be. Go outside. Don't look at the truck. Get your mail or walk to the car. Whatever looks natural. Let him see you're not rattled. Then come back inside and call the non-emergency line with the plate. And if he gets out, Doss made a sound that might have been a short laugh. Then we find out who he actually is. I'll call you back, Ryan said. He put his phone in his pocket. He put his jacket on. He opened the front door and stepped out. The cold hit his face and he let it. He walked to the mailbox. Opened it, took out the contents without looking at them. 3 envelopes, a circular he'd recycle without reading, a package slip. He closed the mailbox. He turned back toward the house. He didn't look at the truck. He went inside, pulled his phone out, called the non-emergency line, gave them the street address, the vehicle description, his report case number. The dispatcher noted it. Then he went to the front window again, standing to the side. The truck was still there. Then, slowly, it pulled away from the curb, moved down the street at a normal speed. turned right at the corner without signaling, and disappeared. Ryan stood with one hand braced against the wall and felt the thing in his chest that wasn't relief and wasn't adrenaline, but lived somewhere between the two. The particular state of a man whose body had prepared for something that hadn't happened, all that preparation with nowhere to go, turning back inward. He went to Emma's room and knocked. "Clear," he said. The door opened immediately. She'd been standing on the other side of it. "There was a truck," she said. Not a question. "Yes." "Holtz?" "I don't know. Probably connected." Emma's jaw was doing the thing again. He could see her working through it. The anger, the fear underneath the anger, the choice about which one to let be visible. She chose the anger. "This needs to stop," she said. "I know. I mean," she stopped, started again. "I'm not scared of him. I want to be clear about that. I'm angry. There's a difference." "I know the difference," Ryan said. "What happens next?" Ryan leaned against the doorframe. He thought about Dana Reyes saying calculating until he isn't. He thought about the rehearsed statement. He thought about the truck parked 4 houses down for reasons that weren't random and weren't innocent, and both of them knew it. "He's going to do something," Ryan said. "He can't help it. That's who he is." "And when he does?" Ryan looked at his daughter. He thought about all the things he'd been and done, the teams he'd been part of, the places he'd been, the specific, terrible, necessary skill set that he'd spent years trying to fold away into a part of himself that didn't need to be accessed anymore. He thought about a man who targeted people who looked like they wouldn't push back. "When he does," Ryan said, "he's going to make the same mistake he made on Tuesday." Emma waited. "He's going to think he already knows what he's dealing with," Ryan said. The words sat between them in the hallway of their small house, in the Colorado February quiet, and Emma looked at her father for a long moment with that face that was her mother's and her own simultaneously, and whatever she saw in him, whatever it was that his expression communicated beneath the careful calm of it, made her nod, once, slowly. And then, from outside, they heard the sound of tires on the street. Both of them went still. The sound slowed, stopped. Ryan put one hand on Emma's shoulder and with gentle but absolute firmness moved her back from the hallway, back into her room, back away from any sightline, and she went without arguing, which told him everything about how clearly she understood that this, whatever it was becoming, was no longer just noise from the side yard in the dark. He turned to face the front of the house, and then someone knocked on the door. 3 times. Hard. The knock of someone who isn't asking. Ryan crossed the hallway in 4 steps and stood to the side of the front door. Not in front of it, to the side. Old habit, the kind you developed in places where doors occasionally became problems before you opened them. He looked through the peephole. 2 people. A man and a woman, both in civilian clothes. The man was holding up a badge wallet. The woman had her hands visible, relaxed at her sides, the specific body language of someone trained to appear non-threatening at front doors. Ryan exhaled through his nose, opened the door. "Mr. Calder." The man was mid-40s, compact, with the particular flat-effect competence of a detective who had done this long enough to have burned off all the theatrical energy. "I'm Detective Aaron Marsh, Stonehaven PD. This is Detective Carla Vega. We're with the Community Threat Management Unit. Can we come in?" "Yeah," Ryan said. He stepped back. They came in. Vega glanced around the hallway with the automatic environmental scan of someone who did it everywhere they went. Not suspicious, just occupational. Marsh looked at Ryan with the direct, assessing attention of someone who'd been briefed. "We got the vehicle report from your non-emergency call about 20 minutes ago," Marsh said. "We also ran the plate." Ryan felt something shift. "And?" "It's registered to a Kyle Brandt, 28 years old, current student at Holt Defense Systems. No criminal record. He's one of Holt's advanced students, been with the program about 2 years. He was watching the house," Ryan said. "He was parked on a public street," Vega said. Not contradicting, clarifying, giving Ryan the legal frame. "Which is not an offense, but combined with your existing report and our contact with Holt yesterday," she paused. "It adds up to a pattern that we're taking seriously." Ryan moved them into the living room. Emma appeared in the hallway entrance, and Ryan looked at her once, a look that said, "Stay." And she stayed, leaning against the wall just inside the hallway, visible, but not in the room. She wasn't going to her bedroom. He didn't push it. "Sit down, please," Ryan said. They sat. He didn't. He stood with his back to the far wall, facing them, arms crossed loosely. Old debrief posture. He didn't realize he'd done it until Marsh's eyes registered it, and something in the detective's expression recalibrated. "Mr. Calder," Marsh said, "I want to be straightforward with you. When we contacted Holt yesterday, he was cooperative in the way that people are cooperative when they want a record of cooperating. He made a specific point of characterizing you as the aggressor in Tuesday's incident. I stepped on the mat after he grabbed me. He says you initiated the physical contact. 12 witnesses," Ryan said. "We know. We've already taken 3 statements, and we have written accounts from 2 more who contacted the center independently. The witness record is not on his side." Marsh leaned forward slightly. "But here's the issue. Holt's lawyer, and he has one, he called one within an hour of our visit, is apparently advising him that he has grounds for a civil complaint against the rec center for wrongful contract termination. And part of that complaint would involve challenging the witness accounts by establishing that he paused, that you have a background that made the Tuesday interaction something other than a standard rec center confrontation." Ryan looked at him steadily. "Meaning what?" "Meaning he's going to argue that you're a trained combatant who entered his class, provoked a confrontation, and then used a level of force that a reasonable person would consider disproportionate." Vega said it evenly, without editorializing. "He already made that argument to us yesterday before the lawyer. He was—" She glanced at Marsh, the same glance he'd described on the phone with Officer Walsh. "He was very prepared." "I wants to know what my background is," Ryan said. "He's already researching it," Marsh said. "His lawyer made a public records request this morning on your military service." The room was quiet for a moment. Emma made a small sound from the hallway. Ryan didn't look at her. "He can make that request," Ryan said. "My service record is what it is." "What is it?" Marsh said. Not aggressively, just directly. Ryan looked at him. He thought about the years he'd spent not answering this question, the deliberate invisibility he'd constructed around it. Not from shame, but from the specific weariness of a man who'd seen what happened when certain information became part of how people defined you, and who'd decided he'd rather be defined by what he chose to do now than by what he'd once been trained to do. He thought about Gavin Holt running a public records request, trying to build a profile, trying to find the thing that would reframe Tuesday in his favor. He thought about the truck parked 4 houses down. "Navy SEAL," Ryan said. 11 years, 4 deployments. I separated in 2018 after losing the leg. He said it the way you state verifiable facts. No emphasis. No weight on it either direction. If Holt's lawyer pulls my record, that's what they'll find. Marsh absorbed this. So did Vega, though her expression didn't change much. That changes the legal calculus on his civil complaint, Marsh said. Potentially. It shouldn't, Ryan said. He grabbed me, I got on the mat. I used the minimum necessary force, and I stopped when the situation was resolved. What I did before 2018 doesn't retroactively make his actions legal. No, Vega agreed, but it might make a jury question whether you provoked it. I didn't. I know that. 12 witnesses know that. Holt's lawyer is going to try to make 12 witnesses feel like they missed something. She leaned back slightly. I'm not telling you this to discourage you. I'm telling you because you should know what the next few weeks might look like. Ryan uncrossed his arms, sat down in the chair across from them. He was tired in a specific way that had nothing to do with sleep, the tiredness that came from a situation that kept requiring more of him than he'd allocated for it. The surveillance, he said. Brandt in the truck. What can you actually do about that? We can contact Brandt and make him aware that his activities have been documented, Marsh said. Same message we gave Holt. You're being watched. Anything that crosses a line will be treated accordingly. And Holt? We can request a voluntary meeting. We can document every contact that gets reported to us. If he or anyone connected to him makes a direct threat or commits an observable act, you'll have grounds, Ryan said. Yes. Until then. Until then, we document. Ryan looked at the carpet between them for a moment. I was running the same calculation he always ran, the one that lived in the part of his brain that never fully came home from the places it had been, assessing the gap between what a situation required and what the available legitimate structures could provide. The gap was not comfortable. There's a woman, he said. Dana Reyes, former Holt student. She was my initial contact for the warning Thursday night. She has more specific knowledge of Holt's patterns and potential for escalation than anyone else I've spoken to. You should talk to her. Vega had a notebook out. How do I reach her? Ryan gave her Dana's number from memory. She's already willing to talk. She reached out to me voluntarily. Treat her carefully. She's been in this man's orbit and she's taking a real risk. Vega wrote it down. Marsh was watching Ryan with that flat, assessing expression. You've been running your own assessment on this, Marsh said. It wasn't an accusation, just an observation. I have a daughter and a threat I couldn't fully hand off, Ryan said. What would you do? Marsh held his gaze for a beat. Probably exactly what you did. He stood. Vega followed. We're going to keep this active. Anything changes, anything at all, you call me directly. He held out a card. Ryan took it. Not the non-emergency line. Me. Appreciate it, Ryan said. He walked them to the door. They left. He stood on the porch for a moment, watching their unmarked sedan pull away from the curb, then went back inside. Emma was standing in the middle of the living room. Navy SEAL, she said. You heard that. You knew I could hear that. Ryan sat back down in the chair. The fatigue had settled more deeply now, the kind that came after sustained alertness. Not exhaustion, just the body acknowledging that it had been running hot for 4 days. I've never hidden it from you, he said. I just don't talk about it. I know. Emma sat on the couch across from him. She had the look of someone rearranging furniture in their head, taking pieces she'd always had and putting them in different positions now that she had a clearer floor plan. The way you move, the way you assess rooms, the way you never sit with your back to a door. She paused. I always knew there was a reason, I just didn't... Another pause. I didn't know the specific words. Does it change anything? She thought about it honestly, which he appreciated. She didn't give him the reflexive of course, not that would have felt performative. It explains things, she said finally. That's different from changing things. Ryan nodded. Were you good at it? She said. The question surprised him, not because it was inappropriate, but because of how simple it was. The direct, uncomplicated curiosity of someone asking a genuine question rather than a loaded one. Yes, he said. Were you... She stopped. He could see her finding the boundary of what she was willing to ask and respecting it. Never mind. You can ask. Did you... She looked at her hands. Did people get hurt? Because of what you did. The question sat in the room with the particular weight of a question that deserved an honest answer and couldn't be given one quickly. Yes, Ryan said. Emma was quiet. On both sides, he said. That's the nature of... He stopped, started again. I'm not going to tell you it was clean. It wasn't. None of it was. But the people I worked with, the things we were trying to prevent... He let the sentence settle without finishing it. Some things didn't finish cleanly. Emma looked up. Do you regret it? Parts of it, Ryan said. The part where I came home and you were still here. No. Emma's expression did something complicated that she didn't try to hide. Okay, she said. Okay? I mean, she made a small gesture. It's a lot. I need to think about it. That's fair. But I'm not... She met his eyes. I'm not scared of you. I want you to know that, in case that's what you were worried about. Ryan looked at his daughter and felt something move in his chest that he couldn't have named precisely and didn't try to. I know, he said. Monday came in cold and functional. Ryan drove Emma to school, watched her go through the doors, and went directly to the Stonehaven PD main building on Federal Street. Not because Marsh had asked him to, but because Ryan had thought through the situation overnight, and arrived at the conclusion that waiting for Holt to make the next move, while strategically correct from a legal standpoint, was not how Ryan was built to operate. He didn't do passive holding patterns well. He never had. It was the thing his last commanding officer had praised him for in operational contexts, and the thing his therapist had circled in red during his separation transition. The inability to settle into monitored waiting without it costing him something. He asked for Marsh at the front desk. They called up. He waited in the lobby for 6 minutes. Marsh came down looking like a man who had already been at work for 3 hours, which he probably had. Calder, he said. Come up. The detective division floor was the specific organized chaos of every detective floor Ryan had ever been in. Controlled mess, everyone moving with a purpose that wasn't immediately legible to outsiders. Marsh walked him past two open workstations to a small conference room with a round table and 4 chairs and a whiteboard with unrelated case notes on it. They sat. Dana Reyes came in this morning, Marsh said. First thing, she was here when I arrived. Good, Ryan said. She's given us a statement that, Marsh looked at his notes, that meaningfully advances our understanding of Holt's pattern of behavior. There are at least 2 incidents before what happened to you that we could potentially pursue if the prior victims are willing to make formal statements. He set the notes down. But that's a process. What I want to talk about right now is the immediate. Brant, Ryan said. Brant came in voluntarily at 9 a.m. after we called him. He had a lawyer with him, which means Holt told him to lawyer up before we even contacted him, which tells us about the level of coordination happening on that side. Marsh folded his hands on the table. Brant said the parking was coincidental. He claimed he was in the area visiting a friend on your street. What friend? He couldn't provide a name. Ryan looked at Marsh. Marsh looked back with the expression of a man who understood how inadequate the phrase "he couldn't provide a name" was in this context. He's coordinating, Ryan said. Brant's not doing this on his own initiative. This is Holt using a student as a proxy so Holt himself stays clean. That's our read, Marsh said. The problem is proving it. He paused. Holt is careful. Careful in a specific way. He doesn't make direct moves. He creates conditions and lets other people fill them in. Ryan thought about Dana's word, calculating. What's the actual risk level? Ryan said. Professional read, not the hedged version. Marsh was quiet for a moment. It was the kind of quiet that was itself an answer. The pattern Dana describes, Marsh said slowly, is of a man who escalates incrementally and tests responses. The surveillance, Brant's parking, is a test. It's designed to see what you do. If you respond with visible fear or disruption to your routine, that's information for him. If you don't respond, he paused. Some people in that pattern de-escalate when they realize the target isn't going to be destabilized. Others read it as a challenge and escalate further. Which category is Holt? Marsh looked at him steadily. We don't know yet. That's honest, Ryan said. I try to be. Marsh picked up his pen, turned it in his hand. There's something else. Holt's lawyer filed the civil complaint against Westbrook this morning. It names you as a party. Ryan had expected this. He didn't react. The complaint argues that Westbrook negligently failed to ensure participant safety by allowing an individual with a professional combat background to participate in a recreational self-defense class without disclosure. Marsh said it with the flat neutrality of someone reading a document they personally found irritating. It's framed as a safety issue. Holt as the victim of an undisclosed threat. He grabbed me, Ryan said. For the 3rd time in 4 days. The phrase was starting to feel like something he was going to be saying for a long time. I know. And the complaint doesn't survive serious legal scrutiny based on the witness record, but it serves a purpose that isn't about winning in court. It creates a public record. It gets your name and your background into a document that can be referenced. Marsh set the pen down. Holt's been researching you. Your military record, your employment history at Meridian Security, your address, which is public record, you're in the directory. He knows your daughter's school from the rec center schedule. He knows your Tuesday routine. Ryan was very still. He's building a file, Ryan said. Yes. On me. Yes. The room felt smaller suddenly. Not because of anything physical. The room was what it was. But because the map of what Holt was doing had just come into sharper relief, and the map was larger than Ryan had allowed himself to fully consider. I thought about the SEAL instructors who'd taught him surveillance and counter-surveillance in the early years. The ones who'd explained that the most dangerous adversary was rarely the one who acted immediately. It was the one who planned, who gathered, who built a complete picture before they moved. Because when they moved from a position of information. Holt was building a position of information. What do you need from me? Ryan said. 2 things. Marsh picked the pen back up. First, I want you to document your routine for the next 2 weeks. Where you go, what time, with Emma or without. Not for us to surveil you. For us to have a baseline that we can use to identify deviations that might indicate preparation for something. Done, Ryan said. Second, Marsh looked at him directly. I need you to stay inside the legal process on this. I know what your background is. I know what your instinct is when you identify a threat to someone you're responsible for. I'm asking you to trust that we can manage this within legal bounds. Ryan held the detective's gaze. And if the legal bounds aren't fast enough, Ryan said, quietly. Not a threat, just a question that needed asking. Then you call me before you do anything else, Marsh said. Not after, before. A beat. Okay, Ryan said. That's not an okay, I hear you, Marsh said. I need it to be an actual agreement. Ryan almost smiled. He respected that Marsh knew the difference. It's an actual agreement, Ryan said. What? He picked Emma up from school that afternoon himself. She got into the car and immediately read his face. What happened? He told her on the drive home. All of it. Brandt, Marsh, the civil complaint, the file Holt was building. He gave her the complete version, not the edited one, because they'd crossed the line where the edited version was a kindness rather than a disservice. Emma listened without interrupting. That was how she listened when something was serious. The same way he listened, the way her mother had listened. No back-channeling, no filler responses, just full reception. When he finished, she was quiet for a full 30 seconds. He's building a case against you by making you into something threatening, she said. Yes. Using your actual background as the evidence. Yes. That's... She stopped. That's actually smart. In a terrible way. It is, Ryan said. Give him credit for that. Emma turned to look out the passenger window. The Colorado landscape scrolled past, flat retail stretches giving way to the older residential grid of their neighborhood, bare trees against the white sky. So what do? She said. We document. We give the police what they need. We don't disrupt our routine any more than necessary because disruption is what he's testing for. We act normal. We act normal. I'm not scared of him, Emma said again. The same thing she'd said Saturday, but with a different texture now. Not defiant, just a baseline statement. A position she was choosing to operate from. I know, Ryan said, but I'm also not... She paused. I'm not going to pretend this isn't real. Some people would tell me I'm overreacting. Some people would be wrong. Yeah. She turned back from the window. Is Elliot Doss coming? Ryan glanced at her. How do you know about Doss? You called someone Sunday. I heard enough. She met his eyes briefly. Is he coming? Ryan turned onto their street. I haven't asked him to. But you could. Yes. Would it help? Ryan thought about it honestly. Doss was 58, retired 3 years, lived on a property outside the city with his wife, and the specific armed and private arrangement that certain retired military men settled into. He was the kind of man whose presence in a situation changed the geometry of it simply by being known. It might, Ryan said. Then maybe you should stop deciding you don't need help, Emma said, just because you're used to not having it. Ryan pulled into the driveway and shut the engine off. He sat for a moment. When did you get this perceptive? He said. I've always been this perceptive, Emma said. You've just been too busy being self-sufficient to notice. He looked at her. She was looking straight ahead, trying not to let the smile through, mostly succeeding. I'll call Doss, Ryan said. Good. They got out of the car. Doss arrived Tuesday morning in a dark gray pickup that was emphatically not the same as Brandt's blue one, which Ryan's nervous system noted and filed before his brain caught up. The man himself looked like a weather system that had decided to become a person, broad through the shoulders, gray at the temples, with the particular stillness of someone who had operated in high-noise environments so long that quiet had become their default state. He stood in Ryan's kitchen, accepted coffee, and looked around the house with an unhurried scan. Nice place, he said. It's small, Ryan said. I said nice, small is fine. He drank the coffee. Emma at school? Yeah. Good kid, from what you've said. Yeah. Doss set the mug down, looked at Ryan. You look like you've been running a 4-day op on 4 hours sleep. That's roughly accurate. Tell me the rest of it. Everything your text didn't cover. Ryan told him. The full picture, all of it. Martian Vega, the civil complaint, Dana Reyes, Brandt's surveillance. Doss listened the same way he always had, with the complete attention of someone for whom information was a resource to be gathered carefully before deployment. When Ryan finished, Doss was quiet for a moment. "The civil complaint," he said. "That's the play." "Yeah." "He's not going to win it, but it's not about winning." Doss turned the mug in his hands. "He wants your name in the public record as something he can point to. Trained operative used force in a civilian context. He's rewriting Tuesday from the outside in." "That's what Marsh said." "Marsh is right." Doss looked up. "What Holt doesn't know, because he's pulling public records and reading a service file, is that a service file tells you what someone did. It doesn't tell you who they became." Ryan looked at him. "He thinks he's found your weak point," Doss said. "He thinks the SEAL background is the thing that makes people nervous about you. So he's going to make everyone nervous about you." He paused. "But the people in that gym on Tuesday aren't nervous about you." "No," Ryan said. 12 witnesses, and every single one of them is talking to the police or the rec center or whoever will listen." Doss tilted his head slightly. "That's not what happens when people are afraid of the man they watched. That's what happens when people want to back him up." Ryan hadn't framed it that way. He turned it over. "The civil complaint is going to make the rec center's legal team very interested in the witness accounts," Doss continued. "Because if Holt is going to claim wrongful termination, Westbrook needs documentation of why termination was warranted, which means the pattern of behavior, the woman with the cane, Patricia Walsh, all of it, is going to become relevant to a legal proceeding that Holt himself initiated." Ryan sat down. He built his own case against himself. "Calculating people sometimes calculate wrong," Doss said. "They think 4 moves ahead and forget that the board changes under their feet." Ryan was quiet for a moment. "I still don't know what he's going to do," he said. "No," Doss agreed, "but now we're both here, and I've got time." He picked the mug back up. "You have any more of this coffee?" It was Wednesday afternoon, 6 days after the gym, when Detective Marsh called. Ryan was at his desk. He answered on the first ring. "We picked up Gavin Holt an hour ago," Marsh said. "He's in custody." Ryan felt the floor shift slightly under him. He stayed very still. "What happened?" he said. "Patricia Walsh, the woman with MS, former student, she agreed to make a formal statement Monday. We took it yesterday. Based on that and Dana Rhea's account, we were able to establish a pattern sufficient for an intimidation and harassment charge." A pause. "And Holt made it easier for us." "How?" "He called Patricia Walsh on Monday night, after her statement. We're not certain he knew she'd made the statement yet. It might have been an attempt to preempt her, but the call was recorded on her end. She'd set up a recording app on our recommendation, and the content of the call..." Marsh's tone shifted slightly. "He was explicit enough that there's no interpretation problem." Ryan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. "Patricia Walsh," he said. "She came forward knowing he might do exactly that." "She did," Marsh said. "She knew the risk." The woman with the cane. Back in November. Ryan sat with that for a moment. The particular weight of a person he'd never met, who'd walked out of a gymnasium months ago, and who had quietly become the hinge point of the entire thing. "Is she all right?" he said. "Shaken." "But she said..." Marsh paused. He seemed to be looking at something. "She said, and I'm quoting because it was notable, she said she was tired of leaving rooms." The line sat in the air. Ryan thought about all the rooms he'd stayed in and all the ones he'd left. He thought about Tuesday evening in the Westbrook gym, when he'd been on his way out the door and Gavin Holt had grabbed his shoulder. Sometimes the thing that changed the whole board was simply a decision to not leave the room. "What happens to Brandt?" Ryan said. "We're looking at conspiracy to commit harassment based on the coordination pattern. His lawyer is cooperating, which suggests Brandt himself is less committed to Holt than Holt thought." Marsh's voice had a dry, procedural quality that barely covered something that might have been satisfaction. "The civil complaint against Westbrook is likely to be withdrawn. Holt's lawyer has already called Westbrook's counsel this morning. When your client is in custody on related charges, the leverage for a civil play evaporates fairly quickly." Ryan looked at his home office wall, the notes in his spiral notebook, the thermos he hadn't refilled since morning. "Thank you," he said. "You did the work," Marsh said. "You documented, you stayed in the process, you got us Dana Rhea's, and Patricia Walsh did the rest." A brief pause. "Keep Doss around for a few days just in case. There are other students who may feel like they owe Holt a response. Already planned on it, Ryan said. He ended the call. He sat in his home office in the February quiet and let the information settle. Not celebration. That wasn't the right word for how this felt. Something quieter. The specific stillness that came at the end of a sustained period of alert, when the threat resolved and the body began the slow process of standing down. He thought about Patricia Walsh, who had walked out of a gymnasium in November and spent months carrying something she shouldn't have had to carry, and who had decided on a Monday to stop carrying it. He picked up his phone and called Doss. "It's done," he said when Doss picked up. Doss was quiet for a moment. "Holt?" "In custody." Another pause. "Patricia Walsh?" Ryan wasn't surprised Doss had remembered the name. He never forgot relevant information. "She made the call," Ryan said. "Literally." "Good for her," Doss said. The words were simple and he meant them completely. Ryan ended the call. He sat at his desk for another few minutes without moving. Then he picked up his spiral notebook and wrote the date at the top of a new page. Below it, he wrote a single line. Not an after-action summary, not an analysis, just the thing that was true. Patricia Walsh didn't leave the room. He closed the notebook. He got up, refilled the thermos, and went back to work. The thermos was still warm when Emma came home at 4:15. Ryan heard the front door, the specific sound of it, the way the latch caught slightly before releasing, the small complaint of the hinges that he kept meaning to oil and kept not oiling. And he heard her drop her bag in the hallway, and he heard her pause in the way she paused when she was reading the atmosphere of the house before committing to any particular mood. I was in the kitchen. She came through the doorway and looked at him. He didn't say anything immediately. He'd spent the 2 hours since Marcia's call deciding how to tell her, turning over the different versions of it. He'd landed on the direct version, which was usually the right version with Emma. "Holt's in custody," he said. Emma stood in the kitchen doorway with her jacket still on. "When?" she said. "This afternoon." What changed? Ryan told her about Patricia Walsh, the statement, the recording, the Monday night call that Holt had made that had sealed his own case more efficiently than anything the police could have built from the outside. He kept it factual and brief, the way he'd tell it to anyone who needed to understand what had happened without needing to feel it alongside him. Emma listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I don't know who she is." "Neither do I," Ryan said. "Not really. But she's the reason." "A big part of it." Emma unzipped her jacket, hung it on the hook by the door. She almost never used the hook. She usually threw it over the banister, and the fact that she used the hook now was a small tell for how much mental space she was occupying. "Is she okay?" Emma said. "Marsh said she's shaken, but he said something she told him." Ryan paused. "She said she was tired of leaving rooms." Emma absorbed that. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Just that. Yeah." The sound of someone receiving a thing that landed exactly where it was aimed. She came into the kitchen and sat at the table. Ryan put a mug of tea in front of her without being asked. She'd been drinking tea in the afternoon since November, a phase he'd adapted to without comment, because parenting a teenager was largely an exercise in adapting to phases without comment. She wrapped both hands around the mug. "So it's over," she said. "The immediate part. There'll be legal proceedings. His civil complaint against Westbrook is probably going to be dropped. There might be testimony at some point." "Might we have to testify?" "Possibly. I don't know yet." Emma turned the mug slightly, thinking. "I'd do it," she said, "if it helps Patricia Walsh." Ryan looked at his daughter. She was looking at the table, at the mug, at the middle distance of someone running through something internally. 15 years old. Hair still in the ponytail from school, one strand loose across her forehead that she hadn't bothered with. "I know you would," he said. Doss came for dinner that night. It wasn't planned. Ryan had called him after Emma got home, gave him the update, and Doss had said, "I'll bring beer," and hung up before Ryan could say it wasn't necessary, which was classic Doss, a man who identified the appropriate response to a situation and executed it before anyone could overthink it. He arrived at 6 with a 6-pack of something Colorado local that Ryan didn't recognize, and a paper bag with 3 containers of takeout barbecue, which he set on the kitchen table with the efficiency of a man conducting a resupply operation. Emma looked at the containers. "Who got the brisket?" That one's yours, Doss said. Ryan said you preferred brisket. I've never told him that, Emma said, looking at Ryan. You've ordered it every time we've had barbecue for 2 years, Ryan said. That's not the same as telling you. It's better than telling me. It's demonstrated preference. Emma looked at Doss. Is he like this with everyone or just me? Just you, I think, Doss said. With everyone else, he mostly doesn't talk. Emma smiled at that, a real one, the kind that reached everything. She took the brisket container and sat down, and Doss and Ryan sat across from her, and they ate at the small kitchen table in a configuration that was slightly cramped and entirely functional, and nobody mentioned that it was the first meal in a week where Ryan's attention wasn't partially allocated to threat assessment. Doss and Emma talked. This was one of Doss's underappreciated qualities. He talked to teenagers like they were people who had thoughts worth engaging, not like small adults who needed managing. He asked Emma about volleyball with genuine curiosity and followed up on her answers with real questions. And by the time they were halfway through dinner, Emma was explaining the mechanics of a setter's decision-making process, with the animated specificity of someone who loved something enough to break it down for anyone willing to listen. Ryan ate his pulled pork and listened to both of them and felt something in his chest loosen incrementally, the way a knot loosens when you stop pulling against it and let it work itself out. After dinner, Emma did the dishes without being asked for the second time in a week, which was statistically anomalous enough that Ryan noted it privately. Doss and Ryan took their beers to the living room. The house was quiet in the way it got quiet after food and warmth. A lived-in quiet, not an empty one. How do you feel? Doss said. Fine, Ryan said. Then, tired, mostly. You've been running hot for a week. Yeah. Doss drank his beer. He didn't push. He had the gift of comfortable silence, always had. It was one of the reasons Ryan had been able to maintain a friendship with him across the years, when Ryan had retreated from most social contact and found himself unable to explain why. Doss never required explanation. He just showed up when the situation called for it and brought beer and barbecue and didn't make a production out of either. You're going to tell me how you actually feel about the seal thing, Doss said. Ryan looked at him. What about it? Emma knowing. Doss turned the beer bottle in his hand. It's been in the room with you all week, not just the Holt situation, the other thing. Ryan was quiet for a moment. The house settled around them. The specific tick of the walls in the cold, the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, Emma moving around upstairs. I didn't plan it that way, Ryan said. Her finding out. I know. I wasn't hiding it from her. It's just not. He stopped. Started differently. When you come home from that, you spend a lot of time figuring out how to be the version of yourself that came home, rather than the version that was there. And the version that came home is her dad. He paused. I didn't want her to grow up thinking the seal part was the important part. Is it? Doss said. No. Did she seem to think it was? Ryan thought about Emma at the table on Sunday. It explains things. That's different from changing things. No, he said. Then you worried for nothing, Doss said. Not unkindly, just with the flat pragmatism of a man who had seen Ryan carry unnecessary weight before and recognized the pattern. I worried appropriately, Ryan said. The outcome just happened to be okay. Doss allowed this with a small nod. He finished his beer. You're going to be all right, Calder. I know. I mean beyond this week. Ryan looked at him. Doss was looking at the wall, the way he said certain things, without making eye contact, giving the words space to land without the pressure of being watched, receiving them. I know, Ryan said again, and this time he meant the larger version of it. 2 weeks passed. The legal proceedings on Holt's case moved with the particular grinding pace of the municipal court system, which was to say they moved slowly enough that Ryan stopped checking for updates daily and started checking weekly. Marsh called when there was something to report. When there wasn't, he didn't. Ryan appreciated both the updates and the silence in equal measure. Holt's civil complaint against Westbrook was formally withdrawn 8 days after his arrest, exactly as Doss had predicted. His lawyer released a brief statement that said nothing and was covered by no one, because Stonehaven was not a city where a self-defense instructor's legal maneuvering constituted news. Kyle Brandt, the student who'd sat in the truck outside Ryan's house, accepted a plea arrangement that involved community service and mandatory counseling and the requirement that he have no contact with Ryan or Emma. Ryan thought about Brant occasionally. 28 years old, no criminal record, drawn into someone else's deteriorating orbit by what was probably a combination of genuine loyalty and the particular susceptibility of certain people to charismatic authority figures who made them feel capable and chosen. He didn't feel sorry for Brant exactly, but he thought the punishment was proportionate, which was all he'd wanted. Dana Reyes called Ryan one Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the arrest. "I heard they're proceeding with the full charge," she said. "Intimidation and harassment." "That's what Marsh told me," Ryan said. "Good." A pause. "I keep thinking I should have done this sooner, called someone, made a report. I saw what he was becoming and I just—" She stopped. "I left." "You left when you could," Ryan said. "That's not nothing. It's not enough." "No," Ryan said, "but you came back. When it mattered, you came back." He paused. "That's harder than leaving was." She was quiet for a moment. "Is Patricia Walsh okay?" "I don't know her well enough to call her directly." "Marsh says she's doing well. She's been contacted by a few other former students who heard what happened. Apparently she's thinking about filing a civil suit of her own." Dana made a small sound. Not quite a laugh, but in the same neighborhood. "Good for her." "Yeah," Ryan said. "Good for her." Wow. Miles Carter stopped Ryan in the parking lot of the Westbrook Recreation Center on a Tuesday in March. It was the first Tuesday Ryan had brought Emma back to volleyball practice since the whole thing started. The last 6 weeks she'd been getting rides with a teammate while Ryan made himself monitor his own overcaution and force himself to accept that the situation had resolved and that his threat assessment brain was going to need to be actively managed rather than passively followed. He was walking from the parking lot to the building when he heard his name. Miles was coming from the other direction, same winter jacket as the grocery store, same direct way of moving. He'd kept his word in the weeks since, had been one of the 3 people who gave formal statements to Marsh, and had, according to Dana, helped coordinate outreach to former students about Holt's pattern. "Hey," Miles said. They shook hands. "You bringing Emma back?" "First Tuesday," Ryan said. Miles nodded. "How is she?" "Good. She started at the last home game, working on her serve." "And you?" Ryan considered the question. "Fine. Tired of the word fine, but fine." Miles smiled at that. "I heard about the complaint being dropped." "Yeah." "And Holt's case moving forward." "Yeah." Miles looked at the building for a moment. "I'm not going back to the class. Obviously. I'm looking at a jiu-jitsu place on 9th Street. One of the other guys from Holt's class recommended it. Apparently the instructor there is the opposite of, he gestured vaguely. "All of that." "That's good," Ryan said. "You should train." "You think so, even after—" "The training's not the problem," Ryan said. "It never was." He paused. "Find a good instructor and train. What happened at Westbrook was about one specific person, not about the thing itself." Miles held that for a moment. Then, "Can I say something? Without it being weird." "Go ahead." "What you said when you walked out that night. The real threat assessment starts with what you don't know." Miles looked at him directly. "I've thought about that a lot. I've been thinking about all the places in my life where I made a decision about someone based on what I thought I could see." He paused. "You were the obvious example, but you're not the only one." Ryan looked at him. "What are you doing about it?" Miles blinked slightly. He'd clearly expected a different response. "What do you mean?" "You've been thinking about it for 6 weeks," Ryan said. "What are you doing with that?" A pause. Then Miles made a sound that was partly embarrassed and partly something else. "I don't know yet." "Figure it out," Ryan said. Not harshly, just directly. "Thinking about a thing and doing something with the thought are different." He paused. "I spent years thinking I should tell Emma more about who I was. Thinking about it. Holt pushed the situation to a point where the thinking became the doing." He shrugged. "I'd have preferred a less dramatic path to that. But the point is, the thinking only goes so far." Miles held that. Then he nodded. Really nodded. Not the social acknowledgement nod, the one that meant something had gone somewhere. "Okay," he said. "Good luck with the jiu-jitsu," Ryan said. He walked into the building. Diane Pruitt, the Westbrook facilities director, called Ryan in the second week of March with a request that genuinely surprised him. She wanted him to come speak to the recreation center's staff. Not about the incident, not a debrief or an after-action review. She was explicit about that. What she wanted, she explained in the particular careful language of an administrator who had been thinking about how to phrase something for a while, was for Ryan to speak about what had happened in terms of organizational culture, about how environments allow certain behaviors to persist until someone doesn't walk out the door. I want my staff to understand what they were part of, she said, not in a punitive way, she paused, in a learning way. Does that make sense? It makes sense, Ryan said. Would you be willing? Ryan sat with it for a moment. He thought about his default answer, the one he'd used for everything since 2018, which was to decline, to stay invisible, to let the thing that had happened remain a thing that had happened rather than a thing he was now attached to and responsible for speaking about. He thought about Miles Carter asking him if he'd teach martial arts. He thought about Patricia Walsh, who was tired of leaving rooms. I'll do it, he said. Once. One session. That's all I'm asking, Pruitt said. Us. The session was a Thursday evening in late March, 6 weeks after the incident. 14 staff members in a conference room on the second floor of the rec center. The administrative staff. The program coordinators. Travis from the front desk. A few of the facility supervisors. Ryan stood at the front of the room without any particular formality, no podium, no PowerPoint, just a man in a chair that he'd turned around and straddled backward, because the room was warm and he was more comfortable that way and nobody seemed to mind. He talked for 40 minutes. He didn't talk about being a SEAL. He barely mentioned it. Mentioned it the way you mention a credential that's relevant but not central, a fact about his background that explains certain things without defining them. He talked about pattern recognition and how it cuts both ways. How the same skill that lets you accurately read a room can trap you into seeing only what you've already decided is there. He talked about institutional culture, how an environment signals what it tolerates, not through explicit policy, but through small daily accommodations, the things people step around, the complaints that don't quite get filed, the moments where someone looks at the floor instead of at what's happening in front of them. He talked about Travis. Travis sat up slightly when Ryan said his name. He was 22, still looked like he was half in college, and was currently experiencing the visible discomfort of being named in a room full of his bosses. Travis gave Miles Carter my contact information, Ryan said. He read the situation and he made a judgment call. It was the right one. He looked at Travis directly. You could have said it wasn't your place. You could have decided it wasn't your job to get involved. Instead, you gave someone the information they needed to do something. He paused. That matters. Travis looked like someone had simultaneously embarrassed and vindicated him, which was probably accurate. Ryan talked about Patricia Walsh without using her name. She hadn't given him permission to use it in this context, and he wasn't going to assume. He talked about a person who had been in the building, had been harmed by something that happened in the building, and had left without telling anyone, and had spent months carrying something that the building's systems might have prevented if anyone had noticed in time. That's not a condemnation, he said. Most of you were doing your jobs correctly by your own understanding of what those jobs were. But your understanding of those jobs didn't include being a safety net for someone who got hurt in a program you ran. He looked around the room. It should. He took questions for 20 minutes after. Good ones, mostly. The kind that came from people who were genuinely trying to figure something out, rather than people performing engagement. One woman, a program coordinator named Sandra, asked, "How do you know when to step in? When something's your job versus when you're overstepping?" Ryan thought about it. When you have to ask yourself whether it's your job, it's probably your job, he said. The moments when intervention is clearly outside your role don't usually feel ambiguous. The ambiguous ones are the ones where something feels off, and you don't quite have language for it yet. He paused. Trust the feeling. Find the language after. Sandra wrote that down. At the end, Pruitt thanked him in the formal way. Administrators thank people. Genuine warmth inside a professional frame, which Ryan found easy to receive. Travis came up afterward and shook his hand without saying anything, which was the best kind of thank you. Ryan drove home in the dark. The check engine light was on. It was always on. He had decided at some point in the last 6 weeks that it was simply a feature of the vehicle and not an emergency, and he had made peace with this. April came and the Colorado cold finally began to loosen its grip, which happened gradually, and then seemingly all at once. 1 week of gray and then a Tuesday, where the temperature hit 52, and Emma came home from school with her jacket tied around her waist and declared it finally over, winter, done, and Ryan didn't argue with her. He was in the garage when she got home, doing a maintenance check on the prosthetic. The cold had put some extra wear on the ankle mechanism, and he'd scheduled a proper fitting with his prosthetist in Denver for the following week. But in the meantime, there were things he could assess himself, minor adjustments he knew how to make from 6 years of acquaintance with the equipment. Emma appeared in the garage doorway. "You left the door unlocked," she said. "I knew you were coming home." "You always know when I'm coming home? It's a little eerie." She looked at what he was doing. "Is it okay?" "Mostly. Appointment next week." She leaned against the doorframe. The afternoon light was warm for April, coming in at an angle through the open garage door, catching the carbon fiber in a way that made it look almost elegant rather than functional. "Miles Carter called the house line," Emma said. Ryan looked up. "What?" "The house line. Like the number we literally never give anyone." She held up her phone to show him the missed call notification. "He must have found it somewhere. He left a voicemail." "What did he say?" Emma played the voicemail on speaker. Miles's voice, the same direct, slightly self-conscious quality it had in person. "Hey, Mr. Calder. Emma, if you're hearing this. Sorry for the weird contact. I started training at that jiu-jitsu place I mentioned. It's not a big deal. I just wanted to say I thought about what you said, about thinking versus doing. I signed up. First class was Tuesday. I fell down a lot. That's the update. I'll figure out a better way to reach you." The voicemail ended. Emma lowered the phone. She was trying not to smile in a way that suggested she found the voicemail charming and wasn't sure if that was allowed. "He fell down a lot," she said. "First class always goes that way," Ryan said. "How do you know? You said you stopped." "I still remember." He went back to the ankle mechanism. "Text him the number for my cell. That's the correct contact." Emma was already doing it. "This is sweet, that he called. It's a phone call. You know what I mean?" She put her phone in her pocket. "He figured something out because of you." Ryan set the tool down. He looked at the carbon fiber ankle in the afternoon light. The particular geometry of the thing, the way it caught the April sun differently than it caught the February fluorescent. 6 years. He'd hated it at first. He didn't hate it now. It was part of the machinery of how he moved through the world, and the world he moved through was exactly the world he'd wanted. "He figured it out because he was ready to," Ryan said. "I just said a thing out loud." "You're doing the humble thing," Emma said. "I'm being accurate." "You can be accurate and still accept that you helped someone." Ryan picked up the tool again. "You sound like a therapist." "Dr. Morrison says I have good instincts for it." "You're seeing Morrison again?" "I started back up in February. I should have told you." Ryan set the tool down again. He looked at his daughter. She was watching him with the steady, slightly braced expression of someone who has disclosed a thing they weren't sure how to disclose. "Okay," he said. "You're not... If you found something useful in it, that's good." He held her gaze. "I should have stayed with mine longer than I did." Emma's expression shifted. The brace came down. "You stopped?" she said. "A while ago." "Why?" Ryan thought about it, the honest version. "Because I thought I'd address the main things. And because sessions were expensive after the insurance changed. And because he paused, "not great at asking for help that I can't immediately measure as useful." Emma looked at him for a long moment. "You should go back," she said. "I know. I'll find you someone if you don't." "I believe you." "I'm serious." "I know you're serious." He picked up the tool. "I'll make some calls." Emma held the doorway for another moment. Then, "Dad." "Yeah." "I'm proud of you." He looked at her. She was serious, but no performance in it. No teenager appropriating an adult phrase quality. Just Emma, in the garage doorway, in the April light, saying the thing she meant. "For what?" he said. "For all of it." She shrugged, which was how she handled feeling exposed. "The gym, Holt, not going further than you needed to, talking to those rec center people." She paused. "Coming home every day and making lunch and fighting the check engine light and just She made a small gesture that encompassed something she didn't have the exact words for yet. Continuing to be here. That's what I'm proud of. Ryan looked at his daughter in the April light and felt the specific weight of that statement, the weight of being seen, completely and without performance, by the person you'd spent years trying to be worth seeing by. He didn't have a clean answer for it. He didn't reach for one. Thank you, he said. Emma nodded, pushed off the doorframe. I'm making pasta even though it's not Wednesday. You can do that. I know I can. I'm telling you, not asking. She disappeared back into the house. Ryan sat with the tools in his lap and the April light on the floor of the garage and the sound of Emma in the kitchen doing the specific productive clatter of someone who knew where everything was and moved through a space like it was theirs, which it was. All of it was. Gavin Holt pled no contest to the harassment and intimidation charges in May. The judge handed down a sentence that included substantial fines, mandatory counseling, and a 2-year suspended sentence, meaning Holt walked out of court that day, but the conditions of the suspension made it very clear what the consequences of any future conduct would be. Holt Defense Systems closed its doors the week before the plea. The Meridian Road facility was emptied and re-leased to a flooring company by the end of the month. Ryan heard all of this from Marsh, who called with the update in his factual, unhurried way, and then asked how Emma's volleyball season was going, which was the kind of question that made Ryan think Marsh was a decent human being in addition to being a good detective. He told him she'd started in the last 4 games and that her serve was improving, which was true. The dropped elbow was mostly corrected. Coach Briggs had said something to Ryan at pickup one afternoon that could only be interpreted as positive, though it was wrapped in so many qualifications that Ryan had to parse it like a legal document. Patricia Walsh filed her civil suit against Holt in June. Dana Reyes was named as a supporting witness. Several other former students came forward in the weeks after the filing was publicized, more than anyone had expected, which meant the pattern was deeper and older than even Dana had known. Ryan was not a party to the civil suit. He didn't need to be. The case had enough witness support to proceed without him, and his involvement in the criminal matter had been sufficiently documented that his absence from the civil proceedings didn't leave any gaps. He donated to the legal fund that Patricia Walsh's attorney had set up for the former students. He did it quietly, in a way that didn't require acknowledgement or create contact. He just sent the money and moved on. It was a Saturday in late June when Miles Carter came to the house. He called first this time. Ryan's cell, the number Emma had texted him in April, and asked if it was all right to stop by. Ryan said yes. Miles arrived at 10 in the morning with a container of coffee cake from a bakery on Federal Street, which was both unnecessary and appreciated. They sat at the kitchen table, Emma off at a tournament 2 counties over with her team, the house quiet, in the particular way of Saturday morning without obligations. Miles had been training for 4 months. Ryan could see it in the way he carried himself. Not dramatically different, but something in the posture had clarified. The specific self-consciousness of a person new to physical training was fading, replaced by a beginning comfort in the body that came from spending time understanding what it could do. I wanted to say it in person, Miles said. What I said in the voicemail, properly. You already said it properly, Ryan said. Humor me. Miles looked at his coffee, then up. I've been in that class for 6 months, the jiu-jitsu place, and the instructor there, Naomi. She's nothing like Holt. She notices when someone's struggling and she addresses it without making them feel like that. She notices when someone's doing well, and she tells them, but not in a way that makes other people feel less. He paused. I've been thinking about how much of a difference that makes. Just being in a room where the person with authority is using it right. Does she know about Holt? Ryan said. Your history with that class? I told her eventually. She said, Miles smiled slightly. She said that the people who've been in bad training environments sometimes make the best students because they already know what it feels like when it goes wrong. Ryan turned his coffee mug. She sounds like a good instructor. She is. Miles paused. I told her about you. What happened at Westbrook? She asked if you'd ever consider coming in, as a guest. Not to teach a class, just to talk to her students. Ryan started to answer and Miles held up a hand. I know. You said no to the rec center thing. I did the rec center thing, Ryan said. 1 session. Miles blinked. You did? Pruitt asked. I said yes. I didn't know that. A pause. Would you consider... No, Ryan said. Not unkindly, just clearly. I'm done with the guest appearances. Miles looked at him. Can I ask why? Ryan thought about it. How to say the true thing accurately. Because there's a version of this story where I become the lesson, he said. Where the incident at Westbrook turns into a thing I carry around and reference and am defined by. He paused. I don't want that version. I did what I did because the situation called for it. The rec center session I did because Pruitt needed something specific and I was the right person to provide it. He set the mug down. But I'm not a cautionary tale. I'm not an inspiration. I'm a person who had a hard week in February and came out of it without anything broken. Miles was quiet for a moment. Then, that's a version of what I've been trying to figure out too. The line between something mattering and something becoming your whole identity. Yeah, Ryan said. The training helps with that actually. Jiu-jitsu. Miles looked slightly surprised to be saying it. There's something about getting on the mat and being a beginner that it's very leveling. You can't perform competence you don't have. The mat shows you exactly where you are. He paused. Holt's class was never that. It was always about the performance. Naomi's class is never that. It's always about the actual thing. Ryan nodded. You should come watch sometime, Miles said. Not pushing, genuinely offering. Not to demonstrate anything, just, we have open observation Saturdays. I think you'd like what you saw. Ryan thought about it. Saturday mornings, Emma at practice or a tournament. An hour in a room watching people learn something real under someone who taught it right. Maybe, he said. Miles accepted the maybe without pushing it further. They finished the coffee cake, and Miles left at 11:15, and Ryan washed the mugs and put the rest of the cake in the refrigerator for Emma. He called the therapist, a different one this time, a woman named Dr. Calloway, who came recommended by a former colleague and whose intake questionnaire was the most honest one Ryan had ever encountered, in July. First appointment was the following Thursday. He didn't tell Emma about it until the day of, when she saw the appointment blocked on the shared calendar they used to coordinate their schedules. She looked at her phone, then at him, and said simply, "Good." That was it. Just good. He drove to the appointment at 3 p.m., parallel parked on a street he didn't know well, walked 2 blocks to a building that was neither clinical nor trying too hard to not look clinical, and sat in a waiting room for 8 minutes. Dr. Calloway was 50, direct in a way that wasn't aggressive, and asked Ryan in the first 15 minutes why he'd stopped his previous treatment. Ryan gave her the real answer, the same one he'd given Emma. The expense? The sense that he'd addressed the main things, the discomfort with asking for help he couldn't immediately measure. And now? She said. Ryan thought about February, the week of running hot on 4 hours sleep. The way it had cost him, not in any outcome, the outcomes had been okay, but in the toll of managing everything alone when there were people available to help him manage it. Now, I think I've been pretty good at identifying problems, he said, and not very good at acknowledging that having identified a problem is not the same as having addressed it. Calloway wrote something. What changed? Ryan looked at the window. Colorado July through the glass. Real summer now, the mountains visible on the clear days in a way they weren't through winter haze. My daughter told me she was proud of me, he said. Calloway waited. For continuing to be here, he said. Those were the words she used. Continuing to be here. He paused. And I realized I'd been so focused on being here correctly, doing the lunch and the driving and the logistics of it, not messing it up, that I'd been less present than I thought. The shell of being here. He paused again. I don't want to give her the shell. Calloway looked at him for a moment. That's a good place to start, she said. Emma's volleyball team made the regional semifinals in August. Ryan sat in the third row of the away gymnasium, 2 hours south of Stonehaven, a school that was larger than Emma's with better equipment and a home crowd that was considerably louder, and watched his daughter play with the focused, clean attention of someone who wasn't monitoring exits. She played well, not perfectly. A communication breakdown in the third set that cost them a critical point, and the dropped elbow came back briefly under pressure in the fourth, which Ryan noted without judgment because pressure did that. Pressure brought back the old habits, and the work was always about training the new ones deep enough that they held under pressure. But well. Composure at the net. Smart decision-making on the line. They won in 5 sets. In the parking lot afterward, Emma found him in the crowd with the specific radar she'd always had for locating him in public spaces. She was sweaty and still wearing her knee pads, and her ponytail had completely given up, and she looked exactly like someone who had just played the fifth set of a semifinal match and won it. "Did you see the third set?" she said. "I saw it. The communication thing. Work on it in practice," he said. "Tonight you won." Emma looked at him. "You're not going to tell me the elbow." "I'm going to tell you the elbow later. Tonight you won." She held for a beat. Then she stepped forward and hugged him. Not the half hug of recent years, the automatic familial contact, but a full, real one, both arms, the kind that lasted longer than was strictly necessary. Ryan put his arms around his daughter in the parking lot of an away gymnasium in August and held on. She smelled like court dust and the specific sports shampoo she'd switched to in April. She was going to be taller than he expected by the time she was 18. He could feel it already in the span of her shoulders, the proportion of her against him shifting from how it had been even a year ago. She was going to be fine. More than fine. She was going to be better than fine in ways he couldn't fully anticipate and was learning to accept rather than plan for. They drove home in the dark, 2 hours north on an August highway, Emma asleep in the passenger seat by the 45-minute mark with her jacket bundled against the window, mouth slightly open, completely unconscious in the absolute way of someone whose body had exhausted its remaining reserves of adrenaline and was done. The check engine light was on. Ryan drove north with the mountains invisible in the dark, and the road clear and the radio low enough that it didn't wake Emma, something acoustic and unhurried that she'd put on before she fell asleep. And he thought about the last 6 months in the way you think about things when you have 2 hours of quiet, dark road ahead of you. Not analytically, not with the threat assessment part of his brain, just the way a person thinks when they're tired and content, and the person they're most responsible for is asleep next to them and safe. He thought about Patricia Walsh, who was tired of leaving rooms. He thought about Miles Carter falling down on a mat and getting back up. He thought about Dana Reyes making a phone call in the dark from her own history and using it to intervene in his. He thought about Elliot Doss arriving with beer and barbecue and not requiring anything from Ryan except his presence at the table. He thought about Dr. Calloway's office on Thursday afternoons, which he'd been to 4 times now, and which he did not find comfortable and did find useful, which was probably the correct proportion for it. He thought about Gavin Holt, who had looked at a man with a limp and a quiet way of moving and had made a decision about what he was looking at, had built a whole theory on it, a methodology, a performance, and had been wrong in every direction. Ryan wasn't angry about it anymore. He'd moved through the anger in February and come out the other side into something that wasn't quite forgiveness. He didn't think Holt deserved the word, didn't think the word was actually his to offer, but was something like disinterest. Holt was a fact that had happened to him, the way certain weather was a fact, and the weather had passed. What remained was the road, the mountains in the dark, Emma asleep with her jacket against the window. The limp was still there. It would always be there. The body carried what it carried. The prosthetic was part of the machinery of how he moved, and the machinery worked, and he'd made peace with that in year 2 and deepened the peace in every year since. The quiet was still there too. He'd always been a quiet man. People had read it as damage sometimes, as absence, as the specific hollowness of someone who'd been in hard places and come home less than whole. He'd decided some time ago to stop arguing with the misread. The people who knew him, the small, essential people, the ones that counted, they knew what the quiet was. Emma knew what the quiet was. That was enough. That had always been enough. He drove north on the August highway and let the road unspool ahead of him, and the check engine light burned its steady amber on the dashboard, and the mountains waited in the dark, and Ryan Calder drove his daughter home. You never know what someone is carrying just from the way they walk through a door. The ones who've been through the hardest things are often the quietest about it, and quiet, in the right person, is never the same thing.